This is the multi-voice text-to-speech podfic reading of A Family Man by Puuvillaa, composed by Burning Aurora, Kaliana, and Flowerhawk. Chapter 1. A picture of Remus wearing a dark blue hoodie, sitting down with his legs spread. At the bottom of the picture, he's holding the base of his hard cock. It's lovely and pink, contrasting with the dark hoodie, a bead of pre-cum on the tip that's still half hidden behind his foreskin. He's looking up to the camera from behind his lashes, the brown of his eyes looking deeper in the lighting of the room he's in. He's biting his lip coyly. Day 72. On his way to the door, Sirius looked in the mirror once more to make sure that he hadn't stained his white shirt. The shirt was spotless, so he went to open the door, his lips spreading into a smile as he encountered Remus standing there.
"Hi,"
Sirius said.
"Hello. Come in."
Sirius stepped aside to give Remus room, and Remus came in, bringing his enticing scent with him. There was something different about it, but that could have just been because it had been a while since they had last seen each other. Remus was wearing a thick pink sweatshirt with a big blue star on the front, and Sirius itched to push his hands under it to feel Remus's body, which was completely obscured by the garment. After Remus had taken his shoes off, Sirius led him to the dining room.
"I have dinner ready,"
he said.
"Did you cook it?" "I did this time, yeah. It feels so good to get to cook sometimes."
Sirius pulled out a chair for Remus. Remus looked at it, then glanced at Sirius before sitting down. Sirius served them dinner, risotto with prawns, but as they ate, he noticed an odd tension in Remus. Remus's conversation was stilted, but maybe he was tired. He would have had an early morning, which might easily be catching up with him at that hour. It was odd, though, that Remus kept stopping to look at Sirius in thought before shaking his head a bit and continuing to eat. Sirius was almost relieved when they had both finished their food.
"I have ice cream for dessert,"
Sirius said.
"What kind of ice cream?"
"Chocolate."
Revulsion flashed on Remus's face, although it was so fast that Sirius might have read it wrong.
"I'm not in the mood for ice cream,"
Remus said.
"Oh, okay. I got chocolate because you like it so much."
"Thank you for thinking about me. I'm sorry I'm not in the mood for it right now."
"That's okay. It will wait for the right mood in the freezer."
Sirius grinned. Remus smiled back hesitantly. Sirius rarely found himself at a loss with Remus, but right then he wasn't sure what he was supposed to do or say. Remus was behaving oddly, but if he had something to say, he would have said it, wouldn't he? Was he having a bad day? Should Sirius ask him about it? He didn't usually need to ask because Remus would usually talk to him about his day.
"Do you want to get into bed next?"
Remus asked. He smiled coyly, and that was familiar. Maybe he was having an off day and just needed something to take his mind off it, and Sirius was that something.
"Sure,"
Sirius said.
"Do you want me to carry you?"
Remus laughed, got up from his chair, and headed to the bedroom. Sirius followed him and stopped in the doorway to look at him sitting on his bed, biting his lip as he looked at Sirius invitingly. When they had met for the first time face-to-face rather than through a camera, Remus had been nervous and withdrawn, so much so that Sirius had thought it wouldn't work out at all. But Remus had loosened up after the first couple of times, his nervousness replaced by teasing invitation, and Sirius was more than happy to allow himself to be invited. He hadn't paid anyone for sex before Remus, and at first he had been unsure if he could actually go through with it. But meeting Remus had quickly become his favorite time of the month. They usually saw each other face-to-face about twice a month because of Sirius's busy schedule that took him abroad more often than he would have liked. But they texted a couple of times a week, which usually included a provocative picture or two from Remus. Sirius kept them in an encrypted folder on his phone, which he opened every time he wanted to have a wank, browsing through Remus's pictures as he touched himself. Remus photographed well, the camera bringing out his best angles, and sometimes Sirius kept going through the pictures even after he had already finished. He had paid well for every picture. Sometimes Sirius wondered if Remus had others. Was he sending his pictures to men other than Sirius? But it was an idle thought that he would then push away, as it was really none of his business. Sirius had spent the past 2 months traveling across the continent, setting up branches for black industries in France and Italy, checking on the branches in Spain and Germany, and taking a little, well-earned holiday in Greece. During that time, Remus had continued to send his images just as before, but there had been something odd about them. Sirius couldn't quite put his finger on what was different, but as he pushed his hand under Remus's top, and Remus quickly grabbed his wrist and guided the hand to his crotch, where he was still flaccid, Sirius realized that Remus hadn't sent him a single topless picture in weeks. Sirius didn't ask, but leaned in to kiss Remus's neck. Remus turned his head out of the way and exhaled heavily as Sirius's lips explored the sensitive skin. Sirius groped Remus's groin, and Remus spread his legs to give his hand more room. He was getting hard, his scent strengthening, and Sirius mouthed at his scent gland before biting gently, making Remus whine.
Such a lovely omega.
Sirius murmured, his lips traveling up Remus's neck. He found Remus's lips and kissed him, Remus opening up for his tongue. Sirius was already hard, impatient to finally get to touch Remus for real, to finally sink into him, but he held back, wanting Remus to enjoy it as much as he would. Sirius pulled on the hem of Remus's sweatshirt, but Remus backed away.
I want to keep it on,
He said, voice sultry.
Okay.
Why? Was it something that turned Remus on? Maybe he liked it when he was half-clothed. It was just that he had never wanted to keep his clothes on before. Sirius's hand slid up to Remus's stomach before tugging his joggers down. There was a new roundness to Remus's belly, but Sirius didn't linger. Had Remus gained weight and was embarrassed by it? How should Sirius approach the issue to let Remus know that he didn't mind any weight gain? Remus would still look just as gorgeous as he had before, and truthfully, Sirius would only be more into it. Remus was, however, in certain ways sensitive about the way he looked, and Sirius didn't want to accidentally make him feel bad. He decided to stay quiet for now, choosing to instead wonder why Remus had worn joggers when he usually wore corduroys or jeans, but he didn't want to ask about that either, because what was more important than the bottoms he wore was what was underneath. Remus's pants had a wet spot on them where he had dripped slick, and the smell was intoxicating. Sirius wanted to push his face between Remus's legs and sniff, wanted to pull off the pants and lick up the slick straight from the source. Once Remus was naked from the hips down, lying on the bed with his legs spread and biting his lip, Sirius suddenly thought about the short video Remus had sent him almost a year ago of him fucking himself with a toy in the bi-flag colors, exactly in that position, knees bent as his hard cock lay on his stomach, the toy going in and out of him, shiny with slick, squelching with the push and pull of Remus's hand. Sirius had watched that video over and over, listened to the little squeak Remus let out at the very end, eyes focused on how Remus's hole was spread open by the toy. He had ached to be inside Remus, had almost canceled his Greek holiday just to come home to fuck Remus, and he was glad that he would finally get to do what he had been wanting to do for weeks.
Aren't you going to take anything off?
Remus asked with a little smile.
Of course.
Sirius got up and quickly unbuttoned his shirt, tossing it aside and pulling off his vest.
I can't wait to have you again. It's been entirely too long.
It has been a long time.
You haven't had anyone.
Remus frowned a bit.
Who would I have had?
They didn't really talk about Remus's social life, so Sirius didn't know if he had someone he could be having sex with. Sirius had assumed that at least he didn't have a steady partner, but he had always also acknowledged that he might be wrong. It sounded like Remus really had no one.
You could go out and find someone,
Sirius said as he opened his belt. Remus's eyes dropped to Sirius's belt, and he licked his lips.
Why would I want to find someone?
for fun.
Remus glanced up before looking down again to watch Sirius pop open the button of his flies.
I wouldn't find it fun.
Oh.
Besides, you might get jealous.
Sirius barked out a laugh and let his trousers drop to the floor, the belt buckle clinking. Remus gripped his cock and gave it a lazy stroke.
Leave your socks on,
He said. Sirius raised his brows. Remus looked up at him and batted his eyelashes.
please.
Remus's smile was sweet as he bit his lip.
If it gets you off, sure.
Remus's smile turned delighted, and Sirius took off his pants before climbing on the bed between Remus's legs.
You're dripping onto the bed.
He said.
Sorry.
Remus said without sounding sorry at all.
I know you're not.
Sirius leaned over Remus.
You little minx.
Remus giggled, but it melted into a hum when Sirius kissed him. Sirius reached for Remus's cock and replaced Remus's hand around it, stroking it the way he knew Remus liked, and Remus grunted, his hips pushing into Sirius's hand. Sirius pulled away.
Turn around.
He said. He backed away enough to give Remus room to turn onto his stomach and push himself up to present to Sirius. His crack was shiny with slick, and Sirius leaned forward to sniff its enticing scent before sliding his fingers through it, stopping at Remus's entrance. He teased the twitching pucker until Remus wiggled his hips impatiently with a whine. Sirius pushed a finger into Remus's wet heat, biting his lip as he imagined pushing his cock in there. It had been entirely too long since he last had sex. During his holiday, he had gone home with a gorgeous Greek omega and fucked him all night long. But that had been weeks ago, and unnervingly, he had suddenly thought about Remus during all that. He had missed Remus. He'd had opportunities to get other omegas too, but after he'd realized he missed Remus, he hadn't been able to do it. It was very inconvenient, since they only saw each other twice a month. Could Sirius really live with only having sex twice a month? And why would he feel as if he shouldn't have sex with people other than Remus? He was paying Remus to be with him, and without the money, Remus would be gone in a flash. That was what they had agreed. That was the nature of their relationship. Maybe they could start seeing each other more often. Remus would probably be fine with it for the extra money. Sirius fingered Remus open hastily, squeezing his cock as Remus let out lovely little sounds. When he finally pulled his fingers away and pressed his cock inside instead, he couldn't stop himself from moaning. It felt like heaven, Remus's soft passage swallowing him, the tightness feeling like relief around his cock, and when he bottomed out, he couldn't stop to wait, which Remus didn't seem to want either, his hips pushing back to meet Sirius's thrusts, hands fisted in the pillow as he moaned. Sirius held Remus's hips, then slid a hand up towards his chest. Remus grabbed his wrist to aim the hand lower, past his stomach to his cock, and Sirius gladly wrapped his fingers around it to stroke it in time with his thrusts. Remus was moaning freely, his cock rock hard, and Sirius's knot was already forming at the base of his cock.
Good omega,
Sirius panted.
You make such lovely sounds.
Remus gasped for breath, his hips twitching as if unable to decide whether they wanted to meet Sirius's thrusts or push into his hand. Sirius kept rocking into him, knots swelling, and almost unexpectedly, Remus came with a mule. Sirius stroked him through it, only letting go of Remus's cock when Remus whined.
Don't stop.
Remus gasped. Sirius obeyed, gripping Remus's hips and fucking into him as hard as he could, his knot already struggling to fit through Remus's hole. Remus whimpered, and after a few more thrusts, Sirius's knot got stuck. He continued rutting against Remus's arse, so close he could already taste it, and when he came, it was with a drawn-out moan as he filled Remus with his seed. Remus reached for his cock and stroked it hard, and Sirius kept moving his hips, pushing his knot into Remus's prostate. Remus came a second time with a whine, his body twitching and hole clenching around Sirius, who groaned, more cum spilling out of him. They stopped, staying still for a moment before Sirius guided Remus to lie on his side with him. Sirius sighed when he had Remus's back against his front, Remus cradled in his arms. It was always peaceful after a knot, and Remus fit into Sirius especially well. One of his hands was resting on the slight roundness of Remus's stomach, learning the new shape of him, and Sirius really hoped that Remus would be comfortable taking his top off the next time they saw each other. Sirius's other hand was resting on Remus's upper stomach, right below his chest, and there was an almost irresistible urge in him to move his hand up to see if Remus would stop him from touching his chest again. He didn't want to tease, however, so his hand remained put.
How have things been at work? You didn't say.
Sirius asked. Remus hesitated before saying,
I got a new job.
Oh, what was wrong with the old one?
It just wasn't working out.
What's the new job?
A librarian.
Oh, that sounds wonderful. You'll finally get to do something you've been interested in.
Yeah.
Sirius squeezed Remus a bit, and Remus leaned into him.
Have you started already?
Sirius asked.
No, I start next month.
Ah, a bit longer as a barista then.
Actually, I already quit.
You quit. Where are you getting money from now?
My parents.
Sirius gasped.
You should have said, I'll pay you extra to make sure you don't go without things you need.
That's okay.
It's not okay.
Sirius frowned, even though Remus couldn't see him. Why hadn't Remus told him he had no job at the moment? Why hadn't he asked for help? Sirius would have immediately helped him if he had known. How long had Remus been without money?
Why didn't you tell me sooner?
I didn't want to bother you.
Bother me. It's not a bother for me to pay you more. If it makes you feel better, You can send a couple of more pictures, or we could have a video call or something.
Okay,
A pause.
thank you.
Anything for my baby.
Remus chuckled.
You're taking such good care of me, Daddy.
Sirius nosed the back of Remus's neck and pressed a kiss there. Remus remained uncharacteristically quiet the whole time they were knotted. Sirius tried to ask him questions, but they were met with short answers or silence. Was Remus feeling sick? That would explain his reluctance to eat the ice cream too. But if he were feeling sick, wouldn't he have said something rather than let Sirius fuck him? It was almost a relief when Sirius's knot went down enough for his cock to slide out of Remus.
Do you want to take a shower?
Sirius asked. Remus sat up and turned to look at him cautiously. Sirius sat up too.
Could I take one by myself?
Remus asked.
Of course.
A pause.
Are you feeling all right?
Fine.
Remus got up and headed to the bathroom.
I'll get you a towel.
Remus nodded. Sirius went to the linen cupboard to get Remus a new towel and took it to the bathroom, where Remus was standing by the sink, looking at himself in the mirror. He quickly turned away when he noticed Sirius, as if caught doing something forbidden.
Here's the towel.
Sirius said.
Take your time. There's no rush.
Thank you.
Sirius smiled, and Remus responded with a faint one of his own, and Sirius stepped out, closed the door, and headed to the bedroom where he stripped the bed. Remus's scent was stuck on the sheets, and Sirius couldn't help bringing them to his nose to inhale. Something about Remus smelled more irresistible, but Sirius couldn't put his finger on it. Sirius went to the other bathroom to take a quick shower of his own. He was sitting on the sofa, wearing his pants and a dressing gown, reading the paper. But when Remus emerged, he put the paper down, much to his disappointment. Although not to his surprise, Remus was wearing all his clothes.
Would you like some ice cream now?
Sirius asked.
No, thank you.
Do you want to head home?
Yeah, I was thinking I should.
Okay, let me just pay you. How much money do you think you'll need?
Remus shrugged. It wasn't anything new. Remus got uncomfortable asking for money and had initially asked Sirius for a very low sum for pictures and then for sex, and Sirius had to talk him into accepting more. Sirius fetched his wallet, thought for a moment, and then counted out 900 pounds, which was almost everything he had. He would have given Remus 1,000, but Remus would have insisted that he couldn't take that much. He still might. Sirius would just have to hope that Remus didn't count the money before he had already left, because past experiences had taught him that Remus was likely to argue if he realized how much Sirius had given him before he left. Remus didn't count the money before putting it in his wallet, and then went to the hall. Sirius followed.
I could actually give you a lift.
Sirius said.
I'll just put on some clothes first.
Oh, that's not necessary. I'll take the tube.
Nonsense, let me drive you. You're clearly not feeling well.
Remus froze, looking at Sirius thoughtfully.
I can tell something's wrong.
Sirius said.
I'll give you a lift, so that you don't need to be around so many people.
Remus straightened up, his first shoe only half on his foot. For a moment they only stared at each other, Remus clearly thinking fast about something. What could it be that had made him act so strangely? Remus said, then paused.
I've moved.
You have. You hadn't mentioned.
No.
Sirius wanted to ask why, but instead he said,
That's okay, though. I'll still give you a lift.
You can't.
What do you mean?
Remus hesitated.
I've moved to Cardiff.
It took Sirius's brain a moment to comprehend what Remus had just said. He had moved to a different country, and he had said nothing to Sirius.
Oh.
Sirius said.
Why haven't you said anything?
Remus shrugged.
Are you going to get back by train?
Yeah.
Have you got a ticket yet?
No.
Well, why don't we sit down for a moment, and you'll check which train you want to take and buy a ticket, and then I'll give you a lift to the station.
Remus hesitated, but then nodded.
Okay.
He kicked the shoe off his foot and followed Sirius into the sitting room. They settled on the sofa, and Remus took out his phone but didn't open it. He bit his lip, staring into nothingness, and after nothing happened for a good minute, Sirius gently placed his hand on Remus's shoulder.
I have something to tell you.
Remus said.
Okay, you can tell me.
Remus went silent, his eyes on the dark TV, his hands squeezing his phone so hard his knuckles were white. Sirius waited, unable to stop wondering what it was that made Remus so nervous. Did he want to end things and didn't know how to say it? But Sirius couldn't ask him that, because if it was something else, It would only divert them further from the actual thing. Remus turned his head down.
I'm pregnant.
He said, "Oh, so Remus wanted to break things off then." But wait, hadn't he said he hadn't been with anyone other than Sirius? Had Remus actually said he was pregnant, or had Sirius misheard?
You're pregnant.
Sirius repeated, feeling kind of numb.
Yeah. Congratulations.
Remus nodded. He was still squeezing his phone. Then, in a voice that Sirius could barely hear, he breathed out,
It's yours.
Mine.
Remus flinched at the surprise and disbelief in Sirius's voice, and Sirius hurried to stroke his back comfortingly.
How did it happen?
Sirius asked,
Aren't you on birth control?
Yeah, I don't know. I must have forgotten to take it. I don't know.
We haven't even seen each other for nearly 2 months.
Remus bit his lip.
How far along are you?
It happened when we saw each other in mid-June.
But we saw each other once after that too.
Remus nodded.
Did you know back then?
I suspected. I had been too afraid to take a pregnancy test yet.
Right. And why didn't you tell me once you had taken the test?
Remus hesitated. Sirius was hurt that Remus hadn't trusted him enough to tell him immediately, and if Remus had wanted to talk face to face, why hadn't he taken the test before they had last seen each other, knowing that there would be a longer break after that?
I had to come to terms with it,
Remus said.
and I was scared.
What were you scared of?
I'm sorry.
Remus finally raised his head and turned to look at Sirius, his eyes glistening.
I'm so sorry I forgot my pill. I swear I didn't do it on purpose.
I didn't think you did. Come here.
Sirius gestured for Remus to come closer, and Remus leaned into him, allowing him to wrap him into a hug.
Is that why you kept your top on?
Sirius asked. Remus nodded.
Why is pregnancy visible so soon?
My chest.
Remus mumbled.
What?
I have tits now.
They're not visible through your top, though.
Remus shook his head.
They're small, but you can tell they're there.
Sirius had the urge to pull Remus's sweatshirt off to see his chest. He was suddenly filled with a need to see them. Would it be weird to ask to see them?
That's why you didn't let me touch your chest.
Sirius said.
And they're sore.
I'm sorry to hear that.
Remus nodded. Sirius stroked his back for a moment longer, but Remus then pulled away.
What are you going to do?
Sirius asked.
I want to keep it.
Okay.
I'll understand if you don't want to see me again.
What?
Remus met Sirius's eyes, his gaze earnest.
I'll understand if you don't want to have anything to do with me now.
Why wouldn't I want to see you?
Remus furrowed his brow in confusion. Sirius didn't know what to ask as clarification, so he had to wait for Remus to say something.
You're not paying for me to be pregnant.
Remus finally said,
You're paying for an Omega who can.
No, I'm paying for you. I don't care if you're pregnant. It doesn't change anything about what I'm willing to pay for.
Remus looked at him in silence.
More importantly, I'm the father. Did you think I was going to leave you to do it all alone? I won't. If you'll allow, I want to be in the baby's life.
What if I won't allow it?
Then, I'm going to hope that you will allow it.
Remus was looking at Sirius in thought, brow slightly furrowed. Sirius met his gaze openly.
I will support you however I can.
Sirius said.
If you need anything, you only need to tell me.
And what about the paying for sex thing?
I don't see how that would complicate things. I want to keep doing it for as long as you also do.
Remus hesitated but then nodded.
I would like to see you more often from now on.
Sirius said.
I feel that we should see each other more often. Not for sex, just for me to support you however I can.
What if I would like it to be for sex?
We can do that too, but I want you to know that if we saw each other multiple times a week, I wouldn't expect you to have sex with me every time.
And are you thinking of seeing me multiple times a week?
Sirius hesitated. As much as he would have loved to see Remus that often, his work made it difficult. Cardiff was relatively far away, so it wouldn't be feasible to go there after work and then have to travel back to London the same day. Maybe if Sirius could stay the night in Cardiff and return in the morning.
We'll see what makes sense for us,
He said.
Okay.
and it's not all about what I want. It also needs to be about what you want. So just let me know if there's anything you need, or if you need to see me less often. Anything.
Okay.
Sirius nodded. They were quiet, something awkward about the air between them. Sirius had never had a partner get pregnant, and trying to navigate that with a partner he was paying for sex was complicated. But they would figure it out somehow. Sirius was sure about that.
I have an ultrasound appointment the week after next.
Remus said.
I just thought you should know.
What day is it? I'll come with you.
You don't need to.
But I want to.
Sirius took out his phone and opened his calendar, looking at Remus expectantly as Remus bit his lip, a searching look in his eyes. He let out a little sigh, opened his phone, and navigated to his calendar.
It's on Thursday at 11.
On the 4th.
Yeah.
Sirius opened his notes for that day. His day was full of meetings, but he would cancel them to make it to Remus's appointment. He wrote down the time.
You really don't need to come.
Remus said.
I know it's difficult for you to get away.
That's okay, I'll be there.
Remus looked at Sirius for a moment longer, then nodded and turned his eyes back on his phone.
Did you want to talk about anything else?
Sirius asked. Remus shook his head.
I'll just check the trains.
You do that. I'll get dressed so that I can give you a lift to the station.
Okay.
Sirius patted Remus's shoulder and went into the bedroom to get dressed. His head was swirling with thoughts, all of them to do with Remus's pregnancy. He couldn't believe Remus was pregnant, and that it was his. A part of him was certain that he would wake up in the morning and realize it had all been a dream, while another part was filled with mild dread over how much his life was going to change because of the baby. He would figure it out somehow. At least Remus would be there to figure it out with him. Chapter 2. A picture of Remus standing in front of a full-length mirror. He's wearing a gray hoodie that's too big on him, and nothing else. One hand is holding his phone, while the other one is pulling up the hem of the hoodie to expose his erection. He has a look of concentration on his face, his lips parted and his eyes on his phone. Day 82. Sirius met Remus outside of the hospital, and they went in together. Remus seemed exceptionally calm until they were sitting down and waiting, which was when he started fiddling with his fingers, and his scent grew restless. Sirius placed his hand on Remus's shoulder for a moment, which made Remus glance at him with a little smile.
Sorry,
Remus said.
Don't apologize. There's nothing wrong with being nervous.
Remus nodded. He was wearing a dark blue hoodie that Sirius recognized from his pictures, which was bad because it made Sirius think about the very specific picture it had featured in. He swallowed and shifted in his chair, trying to reroute his thoughts before anything unsavory happened.
It feels good to be back in Wales,
Remus said quietly.
That's good. Have you missed living here?
Remus nodded.
I wanted to be close to my parents again.
Ah, that's right, they live here. I didn't know they lived in Cardiff.
They used to live in Cowbridge, but they moved to Cardiff a couple of years ago.
Do you now live close to them?
Pretty close, yeah.
Sirius hadn't known Remus had missed Wales. It wasn't exactly strange for him not to have known, but Remus also talked quite openly about certain things. Why hadn't he talked about missing Wales?
Did you move closer to your parents because of the baby?
Sirius asked.
Not really. I got the job before I knew about the baby, but the baby made me look into places closer to my parents than I might have otherwise looked at.
When did you learn about your job?
A day before I did the pregnancy test.
Sirius opened his mouth to ask when exactly Remus had done the pregnancy test, but before he could, a door opened and Remus's name was called. Remus sprung up as if in a panic, and Sirius placed his hand on his lower back in the hopes of calming him down as they went into the room. Sirius sat on a chair, unable to contribute anything to Remus and the midwife's conversation. Remus lay down on a couch and exposed his tummy. It really had a slight roundness to it, and Sirius itched to get his hands on it. Remus probably wouldn't be up for sex after the nervousness of an ultrasound, however, so Sirius wouldn't even suggest it.
The gel might be a bit cold,
The midwife said as she squirted some onto the ultrasound wand. Sirius watched how she pressed the wand against Remus's skin, and an image appeared on the screen. It was a mass of white with a black cavity, inside which was a lump, which Sirius recognized as a baby when the midwife moved the wand into a different position. It was hard to understand that what Sirius was seeing was an actual baby growing inside Remus, and that it was a baby Sirius had put there, no matter how unintentionally. Sirius didn't know how to feel, his emotions a tangled mess, allowing none of them to rise above the others. The nurse talked about the baby's health and size, and Sirius turned to look at Remus, who was also staring at the screen, eyes wide but face otherwise blank.
We can listen to the heartbeat now.
The midwife said. With a push of a button, the room was filled with a galloping sound, and it took Sirius's brain an embarrassingly long moment to understand that he was hearing the baby's heart beating. The baby, whose image he was looking at, was alive in Remus's womb, their heart beating as they developed into a human. Remus's eyes went watery as he listened, and Sirius reached in to squeeze his hand. Remus squeezed back, but didn't take his eyes off the screen.
The heartbeat is normal.
The midwife said. The sound turned off, but Sirius could still hear it in his ears. His baby's heart, the most wonderful sound he had ever heard. He tried his best to pay attention to what the nurse said afterwards, but his brain was fixated on the fact that Remus was growing a baby inside him and that it was Sirius's. Sirius was really going to become a father. He had never thought about having kids. If he had stopped to think about it truthfully, he would have said he didn't want them. But knowing that Remus was pregnant with his kid didn't fill him with dread or aversion or the need to get away. He wasn't sure what it was filling him with, but it wasn't negative in the least. Maybe it was a tentative excitement. He didn't know what it would be like to have a baby with someone he was paying for sex. Was it weird? Could that kind of arrangement really work? Should Sirius stop paying Remus? But where would Remus get enough money to take care of himself and the baby if Sirius didn't give it to him? Sure, he had a job, but Sirius didn't imagine librarians making the kind of money needed for a certain quality of life. Sirius would have to make sure that Remus and the baby didn't need to go without things they wanted and needed. Before they left, Remus was given a picture of the baby. It was the same view that had been on the screen, but as Sirius looked closely, he could tell that the baby had a minuscule nose. Remus carefully put the picture with the baby's health information into his backpack before they walked out the room. They stopped outside the hospital. Remus wasn't fully looking at Sirius, his eyes going this way and that.
Are you in a rush?
Sirius asked.
No,
Let me take you out for coffee or lunch.
I could eat.
They went into a restaurant but had to leave because the smell there made Remus nauseous. They went into a different restaurant that didn't have an odor that would bother Remus and ordered some food. Remus wanted a salad with goat's cheese, and Sirius filed that away as something Remus liked eating, just in case he ever felt like cooking something with goat's cheese for Remus.
How do you feel?
Sirius asked.
Okay, I guess I'm relieved that the baby was okay.
Yeah, that was good to hear. Were you very worried that something might be wrong?
Yeah, I've been really worried about having a miscarriage.
Isn't it after week 12 that the chance of a miscarriage diminishes?
Yeah, so that's going to be better now.
Sirius looked at Remus, who held his hands in his lap, and looked out the window, biting his lip. Sirius suddenly didn't know what to say to him. Should he say something about the baby, about his own feelings about the baby? Should he talk about something else?
How do you feel?
Remus asked before Sirius could decide.
Honestly, slightly overwhelmed.
Oh,
It's just hard to understand. I don't think it has fully sunk in before today that I'm going to be a dad.
yeah. Is that what you want to be, though? A dad?
Of course. I hadn't thought about having kids, but I'm happy to be having one.
Remus looked at Sirius searchingly, and Sirius wondered what his face was telling him. Maybe Remus could see something Sirius didn't know he was feeling.
How were you thinking we'll organize the custody?
Remus asked.
Oh, I hadn't thought about it yet. We have plenty of time to figure that out. Or do you already have some thoughts?
Not really. I've been thinking about it, but I haven't come to any conclusion yet.
Okay. Well, we'll both think about it, and we'll talk when we both have some more thoughts on it. Yeah.
Okay.
They looked at each other in silence, and Sirius, once again, didn't know what he was supposed to say. Luckily, their food arrived, which diverted the attention to it, and made Sirius feel more comfortable with the familiarity of sharing a meal with Remus.
How are you doing otherwise?
Sirius asked.
Okay. The nausea has been pretty bad lately, though.
I'm sorry to hear that.
And it sucks that I can't eat some foods that I used to like so much.
Sirius suddenly had a thought.
Like chocolate ice cream.
Yeah.
I hadn't realized that was pregnancy related.
Should he have realized? Sirius wasn't sure. He didn't know much about pregnancy and hadn't been aware that food aversion was one of the things that could happen. He should read more about pregnancy to better support Remus.
Anything else?
Sirius asked.
Anything else what?
Is there anything else that bothers you?
I've been so bloated that it's been hard to fit into my normal clothes. And I'll need paternity clothes soon, but they're so expensive.
I'll give you money for it.
Remus opened his mouth, probably to argue, but Sirius had already taken his phone out. Remus sighed and focused on his food again. The rest of their meal was uneventful, their conversation somehow diverting to Sirius's job, which he wasn't particularly happy to be talking about, but Remus seemed interested. Sirius never knew if Remus really was interested, or if he was just good at pretending. He had financial incentive to be interested in what Sirius had to say, didn't he? As they stepped out of the restaurant, they paused.
Do you need a lift?
Sirius asked.
You didn't drive here, did you?
No, but I'll pay for an Uber.
That's okay, I can take the bus.
Come on, let's take an Uber. If I had my car, I would love to give you a lift home.
Remus bit his lip, but then nodded his assent. Sirius got them a Uber, and as they waited, they stood in silence. There was something tense in Remus, but Sirius didn't think it had to do with Sirius finding out where he lived. Sirius had known Remus's address in London, had given him a lift there many times, so things shouldn't be different in a different city, right? The Uber stopped in front of a neat building, and they got out. Sirius walked Remus to the door of his flat, and they stopped there.
It was good to see you.
Sirius said.
I think we should see each other more often now that you're pregnant.
Remus's brow furrowed ever so slightly.
Not for sex,
Sirius said.
I just want to see that you're doing okay. I can visit you, so you don't need to make the trip to London.
No, it's okay, I can do it.
We'll figure it out. I don't want you to exhaust yourself now that you have your new job and all.
Remus shrugged.
Oh, also, you can send me topless photos?
Oh,
Remus looked surprised.
I wasn't sure.
I would actually prefer it if they were topless.
Sirius leaned in to talk right into Remus's ear.
I can't wait to see your tits.
When Sirius pulled back, Remus's eyes were wide and there was a new pinkness to his cheeks. Sirius grinned. They said their goodbyes, and Sirius took an Uber to meet with a real estate agent. Chapter 3. A picture of Remus topless, sitting in a corner with several pillows behind his back, his posture looking comfortable. He's biting his lip, and his left hand is on his chest, pushing up on his tiny tit. The area around his nipple is swollen and looks soft where Remus's finger pushes into it. His eyes are the only thing betraying his uncertainty. Day 100. Sirius opened the door to meet Remus looking confused.
Hi.
Sirius said.
Hi, I thought the address was to a hotel.
No.
Sirius stepped out of the way to let Remus enter.
I bought a flat so that I can be closer to you during the pregnancy.
Remus had been taking off his jacket, but froze, looking at Sirius searchingly.
I told you I wanted to see you more often.
Sirius said.
This way it'll be easier.
Remus remained still for a moment longer, but then he looked away and took his jacket off. Sirius hung it up. Remus looked around.
There's an upstairs.
He asked in disbelief.
Yes, only the main suite is down here. Let me show you around.
Sirius showed Remus the main bedroom and ensuite before taking him upstairs. It had been a rainy day, but the clouds had parted and allowed sunlight into the flat.
Is this a penthouse apartment?
Remus asked.
Yes.
Remus nodded in thought, looking around.
It's so bright.
It is. I was very lucky to be able to buy such a sunny flat. The balcony is small, though, and the kitchen isn't great either.
Remus followed Sirius to look at the kitchen, keeping quiet as he took in everything around him. He looked slightly overwhelmed, but Sirius couldn't imagine why.
The floor's so shiny.
Remus finally said.
It is. I like it.
Yeah, it's nice.
Sirius showed Remus the second bedroom and the bathroom before they returned to the lounge.
It's still a bit bare.
Sirius said.
The interior designer only got the necessities ready for me.
Of course you have an interior designer.
Remus muttered. Sirius snorted. Remus looked up and smiled. He opened the balcony door and looked out.
Great view.
He said.
It is. I was lucky that this place happened to be empty.
Yeah, you moved so fast. What about your job?
I still have my flat in London, so I can go there if I'm needed for a longer time. But I should be able to do a lot of it from here.
That sounds really complicated.
It's worth it.
Sirius placed his hand on Remus's lower back.
I really want to be in this baby's life, and to do that, I need to be close to you.
Remus looked at him before turning to look at the view again and nodding. They stood there for a while, Sirius's hand pressed against Remus's back, Remus staring at the view, a chilly breeze brushing past them. Remus shivered, took a step back, and closed the door.
Let's sit down,
Sirius said.
Do you want something to drink? Have you eaten?
I have eaten, yeah. I didn't think I would be seeing you today.
Ah, yeah. Sorry about the short notice, but I just moved in yesterday and I was supposed to organize here before seeing you again, but I couldn't wait.
Remus's brow furrowed ever so slightly, but Sirius didn't know what it meant.
I could have something to drink.
Remus said.
Coke, water.
I'll have a Coke.
Sirius immediately went to fetch a can from the fridge and brought it and a glass to Remus, who was sitting on the white sofa, looking uncomfortable. It was the same look he had worn when he had visited Sirius for the very first time, and Sirius didn't like that it was back. Things were the same they had always been. They were simply in a different city.
Here you go.
Sirius said, handing the can and the glass to Remus before sitting down.
Are you feeling okay?
Yeah.
Remus placed the glass on the coffee table and opened the can, taking a sip straight from it.
Yeah, I feel fine. The morning sickness is gone, so I feel much more like myself.
That's good to hear.
Remus sipped his drink.
Another nice thing is that now I'm horny again.
You weren't previously, and you still had sex with me.
I didn't mean that I didn't want to have sex at all. I would have said if I didn't, but now I feel much better, so it's actually nice to be horny.
Sirius wasn't sure he understood what Remus meant, but for as long as Remus had been okay with the sex they'd had, things were fine. Remus continued drinking, his empty glass sitting on the coffee table as the can pressed against his lips. He looked better, somehow radiant, which meant that he must have looked worse before, but Sirius hadn't been able to tell because there had been such a long time between them seeing each other. There had been something weary about him. He was wearing a green jumper with white clouds on it, and it looked good on him.
Is that a new jumper?
Sirius asked.
Not really. I got it last spring from the sales, but I haven't worn it many times before.
That explains why it looks so new.
Remus nodded.
Have you needed to buy paternity clothes yet?
Sirius asked.
Not yet, but I'll have to soon.
I could go shopping with you. I'll pay for it all, of course.
Of course.
Remus huffed a laugh.
I guess it's only fair, since you put this baby in me, although it's my fault for not.
Let me stop you right there. It's not your fault you got pregnant. It happened because we were both involved. I don't blame you for forgetting the pill, and you shouldn't either. People make mistakes and forget things every day. That makes us human. It wasn't your fault.
Okay.
Remus looked away and drank from his can. Sirius placed his hand on his thigh, and the corners of Remus's lips ticked up.
Aren't you going to drink anything?
Remus asked.
No.
Remus nodded. It was quiet, but for once Sirius didn't feel the need to fill the silence with sounds. It was pleasant to simply exist with Remus in that moment. Watch how Remus drank from his can, how his hair swooped over his ear.
I actually had something I needed to talk to you about.
Remus said and turned to look at Sirius again.
I promise it's not anything as dramatic as telling you I'm pregnant.
Sirius barked out a laugh.
I'm all ears.
So, my parents want to meet you.
Oh.
Sirius hadn't expected that, and he blinked a few times, looking at Remus searchingly as if Remus might burst into laughter and tell him it had been a joke. That didn't happen. Remus sipped from his can, his eyes on Sirius's face, an expectant expression on his face.
Okay.
Sirius said.
They don't know that you're paying me for sex. They think we're in a friend with benefits situation.
Okay. That's okay. I'll keep that in mind when I meet them.
They think that I met you on a dating app, but our relationship never progressed to full-blown romance.
Sirius nodded.
Okay.
Remus took a deep breath and released it as a sigh.
They don't know that you're so much older than me, but I don't know what to do about that. Should I tell them before you arrive? Should I let them estimate your age by themselves?
I really don't know the right answer to that. Do you think they'll consider the age difference too big?
I don't know. They're 5 years apart in age, but that's way less than 12.
Yeah. What are you thinking of doing if they disapprove?
Remus snorted.
What would I do? You're not going to stop being the baby's father, no matter what they want. And I honestly don't want to be raising a baby by myself, even if my parents would be there to help me. I would really like to have your support.
And you absolutely have it. Even if it means that I can never interact with your parents again, I will be there to support you.
Thank you. Not everyone would do that.
They would be stupid not to.
Remus nodded but said nothing. Something in his eyes said he disagreed with Sirius, but Sirius didn't want to start an argument, so he didn't ask.
Let me know when you're free on a weekend, and I'll tell them.
Remus said.
Sure.
Sirius took out his phone and looked at the calendar.
I'm all booked next weekend, but I would have time on the next one. Preferably dinner time on Saturday.
Remus took out his own phone and wrote something in it. Then he put it away.
I let them know that would work for you.
Great. Let me know what time. What should I wear?
Something casual. I really don't want them to think we're in some kind of financial relationship.
Got it, casual.
Remus finished his Coke and put the can down. He turned all his attention on Sirius and smiled coyly. Sirius's cock twitched. That smile always meant that something good was about to happen.
I didn't mention,
Remus said slowly.
but I've actually started getting horny over the most ridiculous things. It's very annoying to always need to have a wank, and it gets so lonely too.
I bet it's really hard.
Sirius leaned closer.
Are you horny right now? You smell sweet.
Maybe.
Remus smirked.
What would you do if I were?
Sirius slid his hand up Remus's thigh, and Remus bit his lip. Sirius wanted to devour him. How Remus managed to awaken such feelings in him had been a surprise to him because, to be perfectly honest, when he had first seen pictures of Remus, he hadn't thought much of his looks. Remus's personality on the app had been what caught Sirius's interest, and the more he had looked at Remus, the more he had realized that Remus was actually really cute.
I think I would have no choice but to take you to the bedroom and fuck you until you cry.
Fuck.
Remus mouthed.
Yeah, I guess I would have to make you come as many times as you need.
Yeah, you would have to.
Sirius smirked and leaned in to kiss Remus, who immediately parted his lips for Sirius's tongue. Remus placed his hands on Sirius's cheeks, and Sirius kissed him deeply, his hand moving from Remus's thigh to his crotch, feeling his hardening cock through the fabric of his trousers.
It would be really hot to have sex on the sofa.
Remus whispered between kisses.
It would be. But what I want to do to you would make the sofa dirty.
Remus giggled, his cock kicking under Sirius's hand. Sirius kissed him once more, then pulled back and got up, extending his hand for Remus.
Come,
He said.
let's go.
Remus took the offered hand and let Sirius pull him up. Sirius guided him downstairs and into the bedroom, taking him all the way to the bed, where he stopped to turn around and stroke Remus's cheek. Remus pulled him down into a kiss, and while they kissed, Remus started opening the buttons of Sirius's shirt. They undressed in a hurry, Remus hesitating a bit before taking his vest off, which reminded Sirius that it was the first time he would see Remus's tits in real life. He had been looking at them in all the pictures Remus had sent him, and he had been fantasizing about getting to touch them. When Remus tossed his vest aside, Sirius immediately pressed his hand on Remus's chest and thumbed the tiny tits, barely more than a swollen area around the nipple. They would grow as the pregnancy progressed, and they would become heavy with milk, and Sirius's cock throbbed as he thought about getting to see Remus like that, getting to touch him like that.
You have no idea how desperate I've been to get my hands on your chest.
Sirius said.
Really?
Sirius raised his eyes to look at Remus, who looked disbelieving, and smirked before leaning in to lick Remus's left tit. Remus gasped and wound his hand into Sirius's hair. Sirius licked and then sucked, taking the whole tit into his mouth, and Remus let out a guttural moan. Sirius pulled back.
Finish undressing and get on the bed,
He said.
Fuck, yes.
Remus hurried out of his trousers and pants, barely stopping to take his socks off, and climbed into bed. Sirius followed, placing himself between Remus's spread legs and kissing Remus before moving down to his chest.
Are they sore?
He asked.
Not at the moment.
Good.
Sirius descended on Remus's right tit and licked it, sucked it, his hand finding the other tit to play with. Sirius's cock ached as he touched Remus's tits. He wanted to rub against them, come all over them. He sucked harder, then moved to mouth at the left tit instead, his left hand finding the spit-covered right tit to rub on the nipple. Remus moaned, his hand in Sirius's hair and cock hard between their stomachs. The scent of his slick was filling the air, and Sirius rutted against the bed to get some stimulation.
Sirius.
Remus finally gasped.
I'm so empty. Please fuck me, please, I'm so empty.
Sirius surfaced from Remus's chest and looked at him, hair disheveled and cheeks pink, soft lips parted, and eyes filled with genuine want.
Since you're asking so nicely,
Sirius said. Remus grinned, and Sirius raised himself to shift into a better position.
do you need stretching?
He asked.
No, I'm so horny.
Okay.
Sirius aligned himself with Remus's entrance, swirling his cock around it until Remus whined. With a chuckle, Sirius pushed in, immediately breaching Remus's slick hole, Remus's soft passage embracing him. He sank in slowly, Remus letting out moans and gasping, and once he bottomed out, he didn't stop to wait, but started rocking his hips immediately. He was gentle, his movements small, but Remus's moans were spurring him on, so he went faster.
Feels so good, baby.
Sirius said.
You're so fucking wet.
You're so fucking big.
Remus moaned.
You always fill me so well.
Sirius shifted his position a bit, fucking Remus harder. Remus was open about his pleasure, which was exactly what Sirius loved about sex with someone, the knowledge that he was giving them pleasure while also feeling good himself. It was rare for someone to be so vocal about it, though, so sex with Remus had been a refreshing change of pace when they had first got together. Remus's scent was thick with arousal, and Sirius stuck his nose into his scent gland to inhale it straight from the source. Remus wrapped his arms around Sirius's shoulders, and Sirius slipped a hand between them to tease Remus's nipple again, rubbing and pulling and pinching gently. Remus's scent got even thicker, and Sirius's knot was starting to swell. He continued for a while longer, but then slowed down to a stop.
No.
Remus whined.
Keep going.
You'll have to turn around. I can't knot you like this with your tummy.
Remus opened his eyes and looked at Sirius hesitantly.
I'm sorry.
No, there's nothing to apologize for. It's just a fact that when you're pregnant and already showing this much, it will be uncomfortable to knot you from the front.
Still.
Rather than say anything, Sirius leaned down to kiss Remus before slowly pulling out. Remus grunted as he did and then hurried to turn around to present to Sirius. Sirius settled behind him and sank back inside, shifting his position a bit before finding one that was comfortable and gave him leverage. He fucked into Remus hard, and Remus moaned deeply, his hands tightening in the pillow. Sirius had been so focused on the tits that he hadn't really looked at Remus's tummy. He slid his hands from Remus's hips to his tummy to feel it, and while it was still small, it was already noticeably bigger. Sirius stroked it, surprisingly excited about the knowledge that Remus was carrying his baby in there. Remus was pregnant because of him, because they had had sex, and Sirius had come inside him. He swore quietly and fucked Remus as hard as he could, taking Remus's cock in his hand to hopefully get him towards the edge at the same rate Sirius was headed there. Remus's hole twitched around Sirius, his weight shifting from one knee to the other, hips pushing back into Sirius's thrusts and then forward into Sirius's hand, his moans continuous. Sirius's knot was swelling fast, already struggling to get through Remus's hole, and Sirius stroked Remus hard.
I'm close.
Remus gasped.
So good.
Good Omega.
Sirius kept going, his knot barely fitting through Remus's hole, and the moment it no longer got through it, Remus came with a cry, spilling onto the sheets, hips twitching. Sirius stroked him through it before gripping his hips and rutting against him hard, so close to the edge himself, and after a moment longer, he came with a moan, hips jerking as he emptied inside Remus. They went still, both panting. A drop of sweat slid down the bridge of Sirius's nose and fell onto Remus's back. Sirius shifted, then guided Remus's hips down with him until they were spooned together. Sirius slid his hand over Remus's stomach and up to his chest, teasing a nipple until Remus twitched.
Do you want to come again?
Sirius asked.
Maybe?
Sirius slid his hand down to Remus's cock, which was still hard, and stroked it with determination. Remus moaned, his hips jerking, his hole pulling on Sirius's knot, which felt good, so good. Remus kept moaning as Sirius stroked him, and it didn't take long for him to come, his cock spurting feebly onto the sheets. When Sirius let go of his cock, Remus gripped his wrist, brought his hand to his face, and licked the cum off it. Sirius's cock kicked, his hips twitching.
Fucking hell, Remus.
Sirius said.
You just know how to turn me on.
Remus chuckled and pulled Sirius's finger into his mouth, his soft lips surrounding it. Sirius couldn't help rocking his hips as much as they could move, and Remus hummed before releasing Sirius's finger. Sirius placed his spit-slick hand on Remus's hip and breathed in Remus's scent. It had already become familiar to him and carried a sense of comfort in it, and for a moment, he just breathed.
Will you have time to see me next week?
Sirius asked.
A couple of times, maybe.
I should, yeah. Just let me know when is good for you.
I'll look at my calendar once I'm no longer attached to you.
Remus giggled. They lay quietly until Sirius's knot went down and then got up slowly.
Do you want to shower?
Sirius asked.
Yes, will you join me?
If you want me to.
Remus rounded the bed towards the ensuite and sent Sirius a meaningful look. Sirius laughed and followed him to the shower. Chapter 4. A picture of Remus lying on his back on a bed, taken through a mirror. His upper body rests on his elbows. His legs are spread, one of them is raised to allow his hand around it. He's wearing socks and a thong that he's pulled aside, and he has a finger just inside his hole. His other hand is holding a phone. His face is focused, and he's looking at his phone. Day 113. Sirius looked at himself in the mirror, casting his judgmental eye on his clothes. Remus had told him to wear something casual, but were his clothes too casual? Maybe he should have worn a shirt, but no tie. Surely Remus would want him to make a good impression on his parents, and what parents wouldn't be impressed by a nice shirt? The doorbell rang. It was too late to change. Sirius pushed his hand through his hair and turned around to open the door.
Hi,
He said, his lips spreading into a smile as he took in the sight of Remus at his doorstep.
Hello.
Remus looked at Sirius from head to toe.
Wow, I didn't know you actually knew how to dress casual.
is it too much?
No, it's absolutely perfect. It makes you look like someone I would actually hang out with.
Oh, Sirius wasn't sure why the idea of Remus not wanting to hang out with him while he was dressed, how he usually was around, Remus hurt so much. He was paying Remus. The only reason Remus wanted to be around him was the money. It didn't really matter that they got on well. It was only a bonus in their otherwise financial relationship. Why would Remus otherwise be interested in spending time with someone over a decade older than him, who was also a borderline workaholic?
Are you ready to go?
Remus asked.
Yeah, if you're sure these clothes are fine.
They're more than fine, honest.
Sirius glanced in the mirror, casting an eye on his t-shirt and distressed jeans combo before reaching for his leather jacket and putting it on.
You own a leather jacket?
Remus asked.
Haven't you seen it before?
No, I haven't noticed it. Do you usually keep it somewhere visible?
To be honest, I've had so little free time lately that it's just been sitting in the wardrobe. I always wear this when I don't need to dress up.
Remus looked at Sirius and thought for a moment before smirking.
It looks very good on you.
Sirius's cheeks went warm for some reason, and he let out a laugh.
Thanks.
They headed out to Sirius's car. Sirius opened the door for Remus, who giggled before getting in. Sirius rounded the car to the driver's seat, wrote the address down into the GPS, and they were off.
I'm really nervous about this.
Remus said.
Why?
What if they disapprove? What if I accidentally tell them I'm selling you sex?
I don't think you would ever accidentally tell them that.
But what if I imply something weird?
What's your story again?
I met you on a dating app. We've gone out a few times, but you're too busy for an actual relationship, so we're just sleeping together.
Sirius nodded. Something squirmed in his stomach. Even though everything Remus had said was true, Sirius was too busy for an actual relationship, which was why he was paying Remus to have sex with him when he had the time and to send him photos when he didn't. It was a good arrangement for them both, and there was no shame in it, not for Remus or for him. So why did it feel like something shameful all of a sudden?
That's a good story.
Sirius said.
It's close to the truth, so easy to remember, but leaves out the parts you wouldn't want them to know.
Yeah.
Did you tell them about how old I am?
No, and I don't intend to.
Okay. I don't expect it to come up.
Hopefully not.
They went silent. Remus smelled nervous and was bouncing his knee, and Sirius placed his hand on his thigh in support. Remus breathed deeply, then released it slowly, then placed his hand on top of Sirius's, and Sirius turned his to hold Remus's.
It will go fine,
Sirius said.
I'm sure your parents are reasonable people.
Yeah.
The drive there wasn't very long, and the closer they got, the more Sirius wished it were longer. He hadn't really had the time to think about what meeting Remus's parents meant. He hadn't had time to stress out about it, and it was starting to become clear that he should have given it at least a cursory thought before it happened. But it was too late, and Sirius pulled over by the building they lived in. It was a terraced house, looking well-maintained. Sirius gave Remus's leg a squeeze before getting out. Remus followed, then showed him the way to his parents' door. He opened the door with his own key.
Ma'am, Tad, we're here.
He called into the house. A woman appeared at the end of the hall. Her long hair was plaited, and she was wearing a casual floral dress. She smiled widely as she came closer, and before Sirius knew it, she had pulled him into a hug.
It's so nice to meet you, Sirius.
She said as she pulled back. She smelled homely.
I'm Hope. Remus has been a bit cagey about you.
Mum.
Remus hissed.
You have, though.
Sirius turned to look at Remus, whose scent had gone complicated in a way Sirius had never smelled it. He didn't know what it meant. Sirius laughed in the hopes it was the right thing to do.
I'm also always cagey about my weird arrangements to my parents,
He said.
I wouldn't call your arrangement weird.
Hope said. Sirius glanced at Remus, who shook his head and took off his jacket. Before Sirius could follow his example, a man appeared in the hall. His face was eerily similar to Remus's, and Sirius imagined Remus would look as good when he grew older.
Lyle Lupin.
The man said and offered his hand for Sirius to shake.
Sirius Black.
Something twitched on Lyle's face, his eyes becoming sharper as they took Sirius in. He must have recognized Sirius's name.
Nice to meet you.
Sirius said.
Likewise.
Lyle didn't sound very enthusiastic about it, though, holding Sirius's hand for a moment longer before letting it go. His smell was mildly hostile, and Sirius could only hope that it didn't strengthen during his visit. Luckily, the dinner was ready, so they all headed to the dining room. Sirius pressed his hand on Remus's lower back, and he could tell that Lyle noticed from the way his scent sharpened. Sirius had hoped that he could sit next to Remus, but Lyle directed them to opposite sides of the table, sitting next to Remus himself. Sirius sat across from Remus and grimaced when he was sure Lyle and Hope were looking away. Remus sent him an apologetic smile.
What do you do for a living, Sirius?
Hope asked once they all had food in front of them.
I'm the co-owner of my own company.
And which company is it?
Lyle asked sharply.
Tut.
Remus hissed. Sirius met Lyle's eye as he said,
Black Industries.
Lyle looked at him darkly, but Hope let out a little gasp.
Not Black Industries.
She said,
That's a big company to own.
Ah, yeah. I own it with my brother.
And what do you do as a co-owner?
I'm in charge of the foreign branches. I spent most of the summer in Europe, making sure everything's working well.
That's so interesting. Which?
How old are you?
Lyle cut in, voice hostile.
Tad,
Remus said.
will you quit it?
Lyle didn't even glance at Remus. His eyes focused on Sirius. Sirius looked at Remus for guidance, but Remus was hanging his head with a hand pressed against his forehead, which hid his eyes from view. Sirius returned his gaze on Lyle.
36.
He said. Lyle's face darkened.
And what is a man of your age doing with someone so much younger? Getting him pregnant too? What game are you playing?
I'm not.
You met on a dating app.
Sirius hesitated before saying,
Yes.
Why were you looking up people over a decade younger than you?
Tad, I'm the one who connected with him.
Remus said, raising his head.
You're not going to turn him into some kind of predator, especially because I'm a full-grown adult.
And now you're pregnant for him.
Yes, because I made adult decisions, and I've made the adult decision to keep the baby, and I really want the father to be in the picture.
Remus's profile interested me because we have a lot of interests in common.
Sirius said before Lyle could respond.
I was hesitant at first because of the age difference, but I decided that age doesn't matter when you're making friends.
Friends who have sex?
Lyle growled.
Sirius,
Hope said.
why is it that you two aren't in a relationship?
Ah, that's all my fault. My schedule is very busy, and I spend a lot of time abroad, so I felt it would be unfair for Remus to start a committed relationship.
So, it's so that you can sleep around as you wish.
Lyle said.
All over Europe.
Lyle,
Hope said firmly.
that's enough. Remus and Sirius are both adults and can make their own decisions about what kind of relationship works out best for them both.
Thanks, man.
Remus said.
Our arrangement doesn't mean that Sirius gets to do whatever he wants while I wait patiently for him. It means that I also get to do whatever I want.
There we go.
Hope said. She patted Sirius's arm.
Maybe we don't understand your decision, but we can accept it.
Remus nodded and took a forkful of food. Lyle was still glaring at Sirius, and Sirius was on edge, debating whether he should leave the room for a moment to allow Lyle to calm down.
I have one last question.
Lyle said. His voice was less hostile than it had been before.
If you're too busy for an actual relationship, if you're always traveling, how are you going to be a father to your child?
Tad, you can't just say stuff like that.
Remus said.
Sirius will be a great father, I know it.
Sirius said nothing. Lyle looked at him meaningfully, but he didn't know what to say, so he remained silent. Lyle was right. Remus and Hope valiantly kept the conversation going, but Sirius could no longer relax into it. He tried his best, but he was sure that they were able to tell he wasn't fully there. Once dinner was done, Remus insisted that they had to leave because he was getting a headache and wanted to go home to rest. They put on their shoes and jackets as Hope hovered, chatting happily. Lyle wasn't around.
It was so lovely to meet you, Sirius.
Hope said as they were ready to leave.
Hopefully we'll get to see you again soon.
I'm sure of it.
Sirius said and smiled. Hope pulled Sirius into a hug before reaching for Remus, who allowed her to hug him with a laugh.
Drive safely.
Hope said as Remus and Sirius headed out the door.
I will.
Sirius said,
It was good to meet you.
I'm sorry Lyle was such a grump. I promise he will be better behaved the next time you come over.
Sirius laughed awkwardly. Remus tugged on his arm, and after a final goodbye, they left. Sirius opened the car door for Remus, who raised his brows at him before getting in the car without a comment. Sirius sighed deeply before rounding the car and getting in the driver's seat.
I'm really sorry about Tar. Dad?
Remus said.
You can call him Tad.
Sirius started the car.
That's Dad in Welsh, isn't it?
Yeah.
Is Welsh your first language?
I'm bilingual. Mem is Welsh, but Tad is English.
But you still call him Tad.
Yeah, I grew up around Welsh. So even though Tad spoke English to me, it was more natural to call him Tad.
Sirius hummed and nodded, heading towards Remus's flat.
Is he the kind of Englishman who abhors Welsh?
No, not at all. He learned to speak Welsh from Mam and me, but he also wanted me to know both languages, and Mam wanted that too.
What was it like to grow up bilingual?
It was sometimes challenging for me to remember which words were English and which were Welsh, but when I grew up, it became easier to make the distinction because they sound quite different.
That makes sense.
Sirius glanced at Remus, who was looking at him.
I suppose it has made things easier for you not to need to learn English as a second language.
Yeah, I guess so.
I think it's cool that you're bilingual. I'm just boringly English.
Remus snorted.
You could always learn Welsh.
There was a beat of silence as Sirius allowed that thought to take root.
Were you thinking of raising the child bilingual too?
Sirius asked after a moment's hesitation.
I'll have to, if you're in the picture.
You don't need to if you don't want to.
That was a joke, Sirius. Of course I want you and the baby to have a common language, but if I really, really wanted to, I would still raise them Welsh. But I don't really, really want to. I think it's more important that they can communicate with us both.
I should learn Welsh too.
Remus laughed.
You don't need to do that for your sugar baby.
There was a weird pang in Sirius's chest.
What about my actual baby?
It's up to you what you do.
They went silent. Sirius was trying to sort through his weird emotions, but couldn't really make sense of them.
Anyway,
Remus said,
I'm really sorry about Tad. He shouldn't have talked to you like that.
It's okay. It makes sense that he would. He's just looking out for you. I should have expected that they might know who I am.
It wasn't okay, though. He shouldn't have been so antagonistic.
I understand him.
Truthfully, Sirius didn't really understand it, because he found it hard to relate to people whose parents didn't hate them. Lyle clearly cared about Remus a lot, although he also clearly didn't trust that Remus could make good decisions about his life himself. And that was something Sirius could very much relate to. An overpowering parent, always getting judged by his choices. Never doing the right thing, no matter what he tried.
Is Lyle a good dad?
Sirius asked.
Of course. He didn't give a good impression of himself today because he's so protective, but he's usually really nice. I think he just needs to get to know you better.
See that I'm not some kind of predator.
Remus groaned.
Oh God, that was so bad. I'm so sorry.
You don't need to apologize for him.
I feel like I do. He's my Tad.
Sirius would have never apologized for his parents, so maybe Remus really did get along with Lyle most of the time. They went silent. Sirius's thoughts were swirling in his head, and his chest was heavy with something. and he was happy to be driving so that he got to keep his eyes on the road. Remus didn't break the silence until they were getting close to his home.
Do you want to come inside?
He asked quietly.
What about your headache?
I lied. I wanted to get you out of there in case Tad said something else.
Oh.
Sirius felt like he should have realized that without Remus pointing it out.
I feel like I should make it up to you.
You really don't need to, but I'd love to come in anyway.
You deserve a thank you for putting up with me and my parents today.
It was no hardship, Remus.
Sirius glanced at Remus with a smile.
You're talking as if you haven't been keeping me company for hours at a time.
Yeah, but this time my parents were involved.
I'm glad they're usually not involved.
Remus burst into laughter, and Sirius smiled, parking the car before looking at Remus, whose face was alight with joy. Sirius followed Remus inside. It was a terraced house, the building made of red stone and the door green. They entered into a tiny hall that only had a coat rack on the wall and stairs up to the first floor. Sirius was very curious about what was upstairs, but Remus opened the door on his left and led Sirius into the kitchen lounge. The wall opposite the stairs was dark, oddly shaped bricks, and Sirius grimaced at the sight.
I don't like that wall,
Remus said.
I wish I could paint it literally any other color.
Yeah, it's quite overbearing.
Remus nodded.
Do you want something to drink? I have water.
Sirius laughed.
I could have a glass of water.
He looked around the room as Remus went to fetch a glass. It wasn't even the size of Sirius's smaller bedroom, but Remus had fit in a sofa, a TV on a stand, a small bookshelf, and a small table with 2 chairs. All the furniture was mismatched, and the kitchen wasn't particularly attractive with its checkered floor.
Thank you.
Sirius said as Remus brought him a glass.
I like how you've set up the place.
Remus snorted.
You don't need to compliment it. I know it's shitty.
It's not shitty.
Yeah, Mr. Penthouse.
Remus said that with a laugh, but Sirius felt it as a sharp pain. The day had been peculiar, and Sirius wasn't particularly looking forward to getting home to allow his brain the time to start dissecting it all. He drank his water and took the glass onto the kitchen counter.
Want to see the first floor?
Remus asked.
Absolutely.
It's not that great, but at least it doesn't have a dark brick wall in it.
Sirius laughed and followed Remus up the stairs.
There's the bathroom.
Remus said and opened the door to a white bathroom that looked neat and perfectly serviceable. The wall was half tiled and half the same stone bricks as it was downstairs, but painted white.
Here's the nursery.
Sirius looked into the bathroom for a moment longer before following Remus to the nursery door. The room was nothing special, just a room with burgundy carpet and white walls.
I haven't started getting stuff yet.
Remus said.
I guess I should start preparing a bit more.
There's still plenty of time.
But I'm already on my 2nd trimester. Time is moving so fast.
There's still time, but if it makes you feel any better, why don't I give you my credit card and you can buy everything you need?
Your credit card?
Remus sounded scandalized.
I can't take your credit card.
Yes, you can. It's the best way for me to help you get everything.
Remus said nothing, but he looked and smelled conflicted. Sirius didn't push.
Is that your bedroom?
He asked, pointing towards the last door. Remus nodded. He looked at Sirius for a moment longer, but then went to the door and opened it into a bedroom that was slightly bigger than the other one had been. It had a nook in the corner because of the staircase, and it housed Remus's wardrobe, next to which, across from Remus's bed, was a full-length mirror. Remus's bed was a twin bed that had been meticulously made and that Sirius had seen in his pictures. He had gray curtains with leaves painted on them, and there were some art prints on the wall. Sirius couldn't help wondering if Remus had used money he had got from him to buy them.
Can I ask you something that you might find insulting?
Sirius asked.
Sure.
Why is all your furniture downstairs so mismatched? Don't you have enough money to buy new things?
It's my old furniture. I've always had it.
Why haven't you bought new furniture? Am I not paying you enough?
That's not it. I just never thought something like furniture was important enough for me to spend much money on it.
Sirius didn't understand why someone would choose shabby furniture instead of buying new things that would last longer and would look nicer, but he didn't want to say so because he didn't want to upset Remus. Instead, he nodded.
I bought a new bed, though.
Remus said and pointed towards his bed. It did look much newer than anything else in the flat.
My old one wasn't good.
Having a good bed is so important. I'm glad you've chosen to spend money on that.
I think having a good bed only becomes truly important once you get to your age.
Sirius barked out a laugh.
I've heard that your body starts breaking down once you hit 30.
Sirius shook his head with a smile on his face. Remus grinned, then stepped closer.
What would you like in thanks for joining my family for dinner?
He asked.
I already got a dinner out of it.
But you could get so much more.
Yeah.
Sirius placed his hands on Remus's hips and pulled him even closer.
I wonder what that might be.
Whatever your heart desires.
Remus's scent was turning sweet, which told Sirius that he was turned on. It was a powerful feeling to know that Remus got turned on by the idea of having sex with Sirius, and Sirius didn't think he would ever get tired of it. He squeezed Remus's hips, which caused Remus to exhale heavily, and Sirius leaned down to kiss him. Remus was a filthy kisser. He knew exactly how to use his tongue and lips to coax Sirius's cock into waking, and Sirius stepped closer, pressing their bodies together, feeling how Remus was already hardening too. Sirius undressed Remus with certain hands, wanting to touch him everywhere, but especially his tummy and chest. Remus allowed him to explore, then allowed himself to be pushed down on the bed. Sirius climbed on top of him before leaning down to suck on his left nipple. Remus's tits had grown slightly bigger, and Sirius could hardly believe how much they got him going. Sirius had never thought that pregnant bodies were anything special, had found the thought of a male Omega's chest rounding because of pregnancy uncomfortable, more than anything, but seeing the changes on Remus's body had been completely different than Sirius had expected. Could it be instinctual? Could it be that Sirius's alpha side considered Remus his mate because of the pregnancy, and that was why he couldn't stop looking at the signs of it on Remus's body? Remus sank his fingers into Sirius's hair and gasped as Sirius sucked especially hard, Sirius's left hand teasing Remus's right nipple. Remus smelled amazing, and Sirius moved his mouth to the other nipple for a change, and Remus whined, pushing his hips up against Sirius's, their cocks sliding together. Remus was amazing. Sirius was so glad he had decided to try things out with Remus, rather than the other Omega he had been chatting with, but who hadn't given him as comfortable a vibe as Remus had. Remus was dripping wet by the time Sirius pushed into him, his cock slipping past Remus's opening and into his tight heat. The smell of Remus's slick, along with Remus's scent, was driving Sirius wild, and his teeth ached to sink into Remus's skin. He bit Remus on the shoulder to alleviate the need, and Remus moaned, his hole tightening around Sirius. It was frantic. It was the hottest sex they'd had possibly ever, and Sirius couldn't tell what made the difference. All he knew was that Remus was quickly pushing him towards the edge, their bodies pressed together, Sirius's hand on Remus's tit, Remus's cock against Sirius's stomach, Remus's arms wrapped around Sirius's shoulders. Their scents mixed in the air, both filled with pheromones, with lust, and Sirius fucked Remus harder to hear him moan, his knot already swelling fast. Remus came hands-free, his cum smearing against their stomachs as Sirius continued fucking him. Remus egged him on, and Sirius only faintly thought that they should have changed their position for more comfortable knotting. He was getting close, his knot already struggling to fit through Remus's hole, and he was going at it with wild abandon, hips slamming against the backs of Remus's thighs.
Sirius,
Remus said. At first, Sirius thought Remus was calling out his name because of how good it felt, but then he started pushing on Sirius's shoulder. Sirius couldn't stop himself from growling before he slowed down and looked at Remus.
let me turn around.
Remus said. Sirius was filled with the urge to tell him no, to order him around, because Sirius was the alpha. Sirius was in charge, but then the sensible, human part of his brain kicked in, and he pulled back, slowly slipping out of Remus to allow him to turn around. He was panting, eyes on Remus's body as he turned to present himself for Sirius, and the alpha inside Sirius was pleased by Remus's submissive position.
Sorry,
Sirius said.
I got a bit too excited.
It's okay. I almost didn't remember that we should do it this way to make it more comfortable.
Sirius placed his hands on Remus's cheeks and pulled them apart to expose his hole, which was gaping a bit, drooling slick as Sirius watched. And if Sirius hadn't been so desperate to come soon, he would have stopped to look for longer. Sirius pushed back inside, gripped Remus's hips, and started fucking him as fast as he could, chasing his high, his knot continuing to swell. Remus was panting, whining, and grunting as he held onto the pillow, and Sirius wanted him to let out more sounds. Sirius's hand slipped under Remus and wrapped around his cock to stroke it back to hardness, which made Remus moan. It felt good, and Sirius continued fucking into Remus for as long as his knot allowed him through. When it caught, he continued rutting against Remus's arse, so close, and the next time Remus let out a moan, Sirius came, spilling deep inside Remus, filling him. Sirius didn't stop stroking Remus, and a moment later, Remus came too, letting out a guttural moan. Everything stopped except for their panting breaths. They remained in the same position for a moment before Sirius guided Remus's hips down with him and they settled on their sides, Sirius spooning Remus and feeling big and strong because he could hold his omega so securely after knotting him. Remus wasn't his omega, but Sirius didn't mind allowing his alpha side to think so.
Was this good compensation for having to have dinner with my parents?
Remus asked. Sirius huffed a laugh.
This would have been good compensation for having to have dinner with your entire extended family and sitting with the most judgmental aunts.
Remus laughed. Sirius stroked his tummy, feeling the slight roundness of it under his palm. Some days, it was hard to believe that Remus was pregnant, that Sirius had made him pregnant. It was amazing how that had happened, something that Sirius couldn't fully comprehend and would maybe have a hard time understanding until the baby was born. He had created life with Remus, and Remus was carrying that life inside him. Sirius was going to be a father, an absent father. His work took up most of his time. That was why he had been seeing Remus so rarely. He didn't have the time and energy for more. Having seen Remus more often had been an adjustment because it meant less time to decompress alone, and living in Wales meant long days of travel, long-distance meetings, phone calls, and less time to stay at home. It was always going to be that way. How would Sirius ever have time to see his baby? He could take paternity leave, but that was only for a while. His baby would not learn to know him as anything but the one who's always going away.
You smell stressed.
Remus said.
Oh, sorry.
Is it because of Taz? I'm so sorry again. He was completely out of line and...
No, it's not that, just work stuff.
Do you want to talk about it?
Not really. I'd rather not think about it.
Remus squeezed around Sirius's knot.
Maybe I could distract you.
Sirius chuckled and rutted against Remus's arse.
I'd like that.
Remus rolled his hips, tightening around Sirius, and Sirius allowed himself to forget about his worries, which worked until he came, after which it was all back on his mind, and his knot was going down too. Sirius was surprised by how much he didn't want to leave Remus, but he had to go home. He dressed in his most comfortable clothes, took a glass of wine, then went back to fetch the bottle before settling in front of the TV to watch something that would take his mind off things. Chapter 5. A picture of Remus sucking on a dildo. It's flesh-colored, and Remus's lips are around its head. He's looking at the camera with big eyes, his hair slightly disheveled. Day 139. It had taken Sirius a lot of rescheduling and arguing with Regulus to make time to go to Remus's second ultrasound with him. Remus had told him several times he didn't need to go if it was too difficult, but he couldn't even comprehend not going. The past weeks had been a weird mixture of work stress, worrying about his future as an absent father, and the sweet pockets of time that he spent with Remus. They had been seeing each other at least twice a week, and it had done Sirius a lot of good. He should have made more time for Remus earlier. Clearly, he had needed to spend time with someone who wasn't from work and who only wanted what was good for him. It also made Sirius feel good to be able to give Remus things, make sure that Remus had what he needed and more. Remus has seemed a bit tired for the past week, but when Sirius had asked him about it, he had said there was nothing going on. Sirius worried it might have something to do with the pregnancy, but Remus was adamant everything was going well with that too. Remus was now visibly pregnant, and Sirius couldn't stop stealing glances at his little tummy. He was always eager to get his hands on it too, and spent a lot of time touching and kissing him there. Remus had been shy about it at first, but had since accepted the worship and, based on the smile he always wore, found it slightly amusing. His tits had continued growing as well, and Sirius would sometimes dreamily think about them at work, aching to put his mouth on them. Remus was so sexy. Sirius picked Remus up from work and drove him to the hospital. He pressed his hand on Remus's lower back as they walked, feeling a sudden protectiveness that he had never felt before. He tried to poke at the feeling to understand where it came from, but it wouldn't reveal anything about its origins.
Are you looking forward to finding out the baby's sex?
Remus asked.
Yes, but we don't have to if you don't want to.
I want to know. That will make it easier to orientate myself.
That makes sense. Have you thought about baby names yet?
Not really. I've been oddly scared to think about it.
They stopped and sat down in the waiting room. Sirius placed his hand on Remus's shoulder for a moment before pulling it away.
Why have you been scared?
He asked.
I don't know. I just got this stupid idea in my head that if I think about everything too hard, something will go wrong with the baby.
I think it's very unlikely that anything will go wrong just because you were preparing for having a baby.
Yeah, the sensible part of me knows that.
Sirius almost reached for Remus's hand to give it a squeeze, but he refrained. That would have been odd to do, wouldn't it? They didn't hold hands.
What other things have you not been thinking about because you're worried?
Sirius asked.
Well, the nursery.
Didn't you go shopping for stuff for the nursery?
No, I lied. I'm sorry. I thought you would have noticed that I didn't actually use your credit card for anything but buying a pregnancy pillow.
I didn't notice.
Remus nodded. He fiddled with his fingers, not turning to look at Sirius.
Would you like to go shopping together?
Sirius asked.
Would that make it easier?
Remus shrugged.
Maybe.
Do you have the rest of the day off from work?
Yeah.
Then we could go after this.
Remus thought for a moment before he nodded.
Okay, I think that might make it easier.
Sirius gave Remus's arm a squeeze. He would have to tell Regulus he couldn't make it to a couple of meetings, which would undoubtedly result in a talking to, but Sirius didn't care about that when Remus needed him. They got called in. Remus's face was pinched and he carried himself stiffly, and Sirius really wanted to reach in and take his hand. While Remus's attention was elsewhere, Sirius took out his phone and sent Regulus a message before slipping the phone back into his pocket, hoping that Remus hadn't noticed. Remus was focused on talking to the midwife, who was asking him questions about how he had been doing.
Have you felt the baby moving yet?
She asked.
I think so, yeah.
Remus had felt the baby move. Sirius hadn't known that. Something heavy settled on his shoulders as he realized that Remus hadn't told him about it. When had it happened? Why hadn't Remus said anything?
It was a kind of fluttering that I've never felt before.
Remus said. Feeling your baby move for the first time was a big milestone in pregnancy, wasn't it? Why hadn't Remus said anything to Sirius? Remus lay down and exposed his tummy for the midwife. Sirius looked at it, thinking about how the baby was there, moving around and growing, and carrying them was an experience that Sirius would never get to experience himself. He would always be on the outside of it, only able to offer his support, and it made him sad to think about.
You wish to find out the baby's sex, is that right?
The midwife asked. Remus glanced at Sirius before saying,
Yeah, we'd like to know.
Let's see if we can find out.
The nurse pressed the wand against Remus's tummy, and a picture of the baby appeared on the screen. They had grown since the previous ultrasound, and Sirius was suddenly choked up with it all. He was going to be a dad. His baby was growing inside Remus. His baby existed, was actually really real. There was something alive inside Remus, who was their first home, the person who most mattered to them in the world, because without Remus, they wouldn't be able to survive. Sirius wanted to gather Remus into his arms and hold him, wanted to wrap around him and the baby and protect them from everything bad. It was such a strong feeling that Sirius had to look away, closing his eyes and taking a deep breath, which didn't help, because he was only met with Remus's familiar scent.
You're having a boy,
The midwife said. Sirius turned sharply to look at Remus, whose lips had parted and eyes widened in wonder. Remus glanced at Sirius before looking at the screen again, a smile spreading over his lips.
A boy.
Remus said softly. Sirius itched to reach in to squeeze his hand, but he didn't. The midwife examined the baby, then let them listen to his heartbeat again. It was a soothing sound, a miraculous sound, and Sirius wished he could record it and play it every time he needed to calm down. When the midwife cut it off, it echoed in Sirius's ears, and he closed his eyes for a while to let the moment linger. Once the midwife finished, Remus wiped his tummy clean before pulling his bottoms up and top down again. As they left the room, Sirius reached in to press his hand on Remus's lower back again, feeling much better once he did. He didn't understand what was going on with him, Did his alpha side understand that Remus was carrying his child, and that was why his instincts were going haywire? He had never felt such a strong protective streak with anyone before, but he had also never got anyone pregnant before. It was inconvenient, because he had to remember that Remus wouldn't want him to act like a partner. Remus wouldn't want them to cross the lines that had been drawn during their very first meeting, and Sirius didn't want that either. They had rules for a reason. They went shopping together, and Remus picked out a cot, a changing table, a mobile to put above the cot, some toys, and a pram. It didn't all fit into Sirius's car, so they arranged for the cot and the changing table to be delivered, but they took the pram with them.
I don't know how I'm going to get the pram to fit anywhere,
Remus said.
I wish I could afford a bigger flat. It will just have to sit by the window in the lounge.
Yeah, it would be handy if you had a big enough hall to store it there.
I'm worried the flat will feel way too small once the baby is born, but I can't afford anything bigger.
I could pay for it.
I don't want to be dependent on you like that. What if we decide to call it quits?
I would never do that in a way that would leave you in trouble.
Remus shook his head. They went to another shop to buy more toys, then stopped at a restaurant to eat. There was something odd about Remus's behavior that Sirius couldn't quite put his finger on, and he didn't know how to ask without upsetting Remus. He'd been getting a bit short every time Sirius asked him if everything was okay, and Sirius didn't want to annoy him.
How's work?
Remus asked.
Ugh, terrible. I feel like every single client has decided that this is the ideal time to be taking care of everything that's wrong, and the branches abroad have needed some adjusting. I feel like if I talk on the phone for even a day longer, it will forever fuse into my hand.
Remus laughed. It made Sirius feel lighter, and he smiled.
Do you actually hold your phone while you're on a call?
Remus asked.
No, I use a headset, but somehow the idea of a headset fusing into my head isn't as funny an image.
Remus snorted.
Yeah, it's not.
I'll have to go to London tomorrow. I really wish I didn't, because it means a meeting with Regulus, who has been very grumpy with me lately.
Why?
Sirius shrugged.
Our relationship is sometimes just tense. I don't think we work together that well.
You've been holding the company afloat together for quite some time. It sounds like you work together just fine.
Maybe.
Their food arrived, and Sirius asked Remus about his job, but Remus didn't seem eager to talk about it. Sirius wondered if there was something going on with the job that would explain Remus's odd moods, but if Remus didn't want to tell him, there was nothing he could do. It would be nice if Remus wanted to tell him, if Remus wanted to rely on him. It would be nice to reach over the table and hold Remus's hand, look him in the eye, and just smile. No words necessary. That thought shifted something in Sirius, and it started dawning on him that after spending so much more time with Remus, he had started catching feelings. In his mind, Remus was no longer the guy he paid to have some company and regular sex. He was the person Sirius was starting a family with. That was dangerous. They had rules exactly because it was supposed to prevent things like this from happening. It had been clear to both of them right from the start that they wouldn't have anything but a transactional relationship. What if Remus felt the same pull, though? What if Remus was developing feelings, too? Sirius shook his head to push those thoughts out. They were nothing but a way to get hurt. He had to tell himself that nothing more could ever be, because that was the reality. Having a child together didn't mean that anything would change, and Sirius needed to remember that. He had to remember that. Chapter 6. A picture of Remus taken through the mirror. He's naked, and his back is turned, and the hand not holding his phone is pulling aside his arse cheek to expose the base of a butt plug. It's rose gold and has a white jewel on it. His skin is glistening around the plug, showing how wet he is. His arse is shaved. Day 154.
Would you have time to meet today?
The text message had arrived early in the morning, and Sirius had since been living in mild anxiety. Remus never asked to see him. Their relationship had always been built on Sirius's schedule, and Sirius was the one who told Remus when he had time to see. For Remus to ask to see him on a specific day, something had to be wrong. If there was something wrong with the baby, Remus would have told Sirius directly, wouldn't he? Sirius was pretty sure that he would, so he tried to push away any fears that had to do with the pregnancy. It had to be about something else, but Sirius didn't know what that could be. Sirius's last meeting ran late, so he barely had time to turn off his laptop before the doorbell rang. He hastily looked in the mirror, and ran his hand through his hair before opening the door for Remus, who was standing there, looking uncharacteristically serious.
Hi.
Sirius said.
Hi.
Remus smiled wanly, and Sirius's anxiety increased. He stepped aside, and Remus came in, took off his jacket and shoes, and then followed Sirius upstairs to the sitting room.
Tea.
Sirius asked.
Only if you're having some too.
I think so, yes.
Remus nodded. He sat down on the sofa, and Sirius went into the kitchen to get tea started. He leaned against the counter as he waited for the kettle to boil, arms crossed and fingers playing with the fabric of his shirt, pulling on it before letting it go, then pulling again. Something was badly wrong. The kettle took forever, and each moment sent Sirius deeper into anxiety. Should he call his doctor and talk about starting anxiety medication again? He hadn't known he could still get so anxious since things had seemed good for such a long time. Sirius prepared the tea, then took the cups and a plate of biscuits into the sitting room, where Remus was seated very formally. Sirius's heart sank, but he tried not to let it show.
Here you go,
he said, his voice coming out softer than he had intended as he handed Remus his cup.
Thanks.
Remus held the cup between his hands and looked at Sirius, who sat down next to him and picked up his cup, which he immediately put down again because it was too hot to hold.
Aren't you burning your hands?
He asked.
No, this is just right.
Sirius nodded. To have something to do, he reached for a biscuit that he bit into immediately, sending crumbs down his chest. He could feel Remus's eyes on him, but it took him quite a moment before he could turn to look back.
Did you want to talk about something?
Sirius asked, still holding out hope that maybe Remus had just wanted to meet for sex. His hopes were dashed when Remus sighed and looked away.
Look.
Remus said, then said nothing else. He was squeezing the teacup, biting his lip, eyes focused on the other side of the room. Sirius's anxiety mounted, and he finished his biscuit too fast, then took another one to give his hands something to do. He finished that biscuit too before Remus sighed again and turned to look at him, his eyes sorrowful.
I want to stop,
he said. Sirius's heart sank.
I just don't want to do this anymore.
Sirius nodded because he couldn't speak. Remus looked at him expectantly, but he couldn't bring himself to open his mouth.
It was okay when we only saw each other a couple of times a month, but now that we see each other a couple of times a week, it's wearing me down.
I've noticed.
Sirius's voice was hoarse, and he cleared his throat.
You haven't been yourself.
Yeah, well, that's the thing. I have been myself. I haven't had the energy to keep up the role I put on for you.
Sirius tilted his head to the side as he considered that. He didn't know why he had never thought that Remus was putting on a role, because it made a lot of sense. It also hurt to know that all the time they'd spent together, Remus had been pretending to be something he wasn't.
I can't go long times pretending to be so energetic and bubbly and whatever,
Remus said.
It becomes too heavy for me because that's not who I truly am.
I understand that. I also have my work persona, and that's a completely different person from who I really am.
Remus nodded.
I wouldn't mind.
Sirius blurted out.
What?
If you didn't put on a role, I wouldn't mind. In fact, I would really love to get to know the real you.
Remus furrowed his brow gently as he looked at Sirius.
Remus, I've realized that I care about you more than what we had agreed on. Spending all this time with you has shown me how well we get along, and I have realized that you make me feel so much more than I have felt for anyone in a very long time.
What are you saying?
I'm saying that I want to stop being your sugar daddy. I want to be your partner instead.
Remus's brow furrowed more deeply as he kept looking, and Sirius's heart beat heavy in his chest, feeling exposed.
You don't really know me, though.
Remus said.
I would love to know you. If you would only allow me, I would love to get to know the real you. And I don't think it's possible for someone to pretend to be completely different than they really are. I think I've already seen signs of the real you, and I have liked all the different ways I've got to know you.
Remus seemed to mull it over, eyes never leaving Sirius's. There was something sharp in his gaze, as if he were trying to protect the vulnerable parts of himself.
How would things be different?
Remus finally asked.
If you were my actual partner, how would it be different?
Well, I guess obviously I would no longer be paying you for sex or photos.
Are you expecting me to keep sending them?
No, I'm expecting you to do what feels comfortable and natural to you.
I don't particularly like taking pictures of myself.
Then you never have to do that again. I'm not expecting you to keep doing it.
Remus looked at Sirius thoughtfully, and Sirius's anxiety had morphed into tentative hopefulness. It was impossible to say whether Remus would really go for someone so much older than him, but the fact that he hadn't immediately said no was positive.
Do you think I'm too old?
Sirius asked when Remus remained quiet.
No, do you?
I wouldn't have suggested a relationship if I thought there was an issue with our age difference.
Good.
I think it's important to acknowledge that the difference is there, though.
Remus huffed.
I mean it. I'm over a decade older. That means that my life experience is different from yours. And
Your life experience would be completely different from mine, even if we were the same age, considering that I'm not an heir to a multi-million-pound company.
Sirius could hardly argue with that, so he said nothing.
I don't see age as an issue here.
Remus said.
do you see something else as an issue?
Not really.
It sounded like a lie, but Sirius didn't want to question what Remus said. Maybe Remus really thought it was all straightforward. And it did, in a way, feel straightforward after they had already known each other for a couple of years.
Will you allow me to take you out on a date?
Sirius asked.
Okay, when?
Tomorrow. I have a meeting in the morning, but I'll be free after that.
I'm free tomorrow.
Sirius expected Remus to smirk cheekily and say something about always being available when Sirius needed, but Remus merely smiled sweetly. That must have been one of the differences between his real self and his role as a sugar baby. It made Sirius's heart swell to know that Remus was allowing him to see the real Remus.
What would you like to do?
Sirius asked.
Dinner.
Sure. There's a Vietnamese restaurant I've been wanting to try. Would that work?
It sounds wonderful. It's been a while since I've last had Vietnamese.
Remus smiled. Sirius smiled back. Remus looked down at his teacup as if surprised it was there and brought it to his lips. Sirius remembered his own teacup and picked it up to have a sip. The tea was lukewarm.
Would you like to go and see a film?
Remus asked.
Sure. Did you have one in mind?
No, I don't know what's on. I just thought it would be nice. I haven't been to the cinema in a while.
Let me know what you want to see.
Remus nodded, then looked at Sirius from behind his teacup.
You can also tell me what you would like to see. Then we can see if our taste in films is in any way compatible.
Sirius barked out a laugh.
I'll let you know.
Remus finished his tea and put the cup down. Sirius was still holding on to his, although he wasn't planning on actually drinking it. Remus bit his lip in thought, then looked at Sirius from the corner of his eye.
What?
Sirius asked.
Do you want to have sex? I've been so desperately horny all day, and it doesn't really help when I wank.
Have you already got off today?
First thing in the morning.
Remus didn't look happy about it, but Sirius's cock throbbed at the idea of Remus waking up and touching himself. Had he used his hands, or did he use toys? Sirius had bought him some toys, but he didn't know if Remus had ever used them for more than as props for his pictures.
Maybe I just need a real knot.
Remus said.
Let's find out.
Remus smiled. Sirius put his teacup aside, then pulled Remus into a kiss. It felt different to kiss him now that they were dating, not because there was something physically different about it, but because it meant more. They meant more to each other than they had before, and there was no money involved, and that made it special. Remus was kissing Sirius because he wanted to, not because he was getting paid for it. Remus wrapped his arms around Sirius's waist, and Sirius cupped his cheek, his other hand sliding into Remus's hair, which was slightly greasy. Remus had never had greasy hair before. Was that a part of his role? To make sure that he was always put together? That made sense, didn't it? Did Remus normally shave, or had he only done it for Sirius? Remus slipped his tongue into Sirius's mouth, and Sirius's thoughts focused on what was happening. Remus had been getting closer, and he soon broke the kiss to straddle Sirius's legs, bringing their lips together as soon as possible. Sirius placed his hands on Remus's small arse, groping it through the fabric of his trousers, and Remus moaned into his mouth, arms wrapped around Sirius's shoulders, hands sinking into Sirius's hair.
Do you want to take this to bed?
Sirius asked against Remus's lips. Remus kissed him before saying,
I guess I don't want to endanger your sofa.
Sirius laughed. He patted Remus's arse, then pulled his hands away. Remus gave Sirius's hair a little tug before pulling away and getting up. He extended his hand for Sirius, who took it and allowed Remus to pull him up. Remus grinned, and there was something different about it, maybe something more sincere, and Sirius guided him down the stairs and into the bedroom. Remus pulled off his jumper and tossed it aside, his reflection on the dark window, and Sirius wanted to worship him, lay him on the bed and touch him everywhere. and that was what he did. He got Remus out of his trousers and pants, then pushed him to lie down on the bed. Remus lay there and looked at how Sirius took off his own clothes before climbing in, and Sirius leaned down to kiss him before making his way down his body. He touched Remus everywhere with both his hands and his mouth, stopping to pay close attention to every spot that made Remus react, spending an eternity on Remus's tits, feeling the shape of his tummy under his palms. Remus let out little sighs and grunts, gasping when Sirius found a special spot to touch, his cock hard and leaking against his stomach. Sirius's own cock was standing at attention, aching to get inside Remus, throbbing whenever the scent of Remus's slick reached Sirius's nose, but Sirius didn't want to rush.
Are you gonna fuck me today at all?
Remus asked with a laugh when Sirius once again kissed his way past Remus's cock and onto his tummy.
Not that I'm complaining, but I can smell how aroused you are.
I can smell your slick. It smells like heaven.
Remus laughed.
You know you can ask for things for yourself, right?
Sirius asked and raised his head to look at Remus.
You don't need to think about whether I'm getting what I want. You can think about whether you're getting what you want.
Remus blinked in surprise, then looked at Sirius for a moment before saying,
I'm pretty desperate to have you inside me.
Okay, thank you for letting me know.
Sirius kissed Remus's tummy once more, but then pulled back.
Turn around.
Remus turned and presented himself for Sirius. His hole was shiny with slick that was slowly dripping down towards his taint, and it was so hot that Sirius had to stop for a moment to squeeze his cock. He wanted to press his face between Remus's cheeks and eat him out, lick up the slick straight from the source, but Remus had asked for him to fuck him, so that would have to wait for another time.
Do you need stretching?
Sirius asked.
There's no way I'll need it when I'm this turned on.
Sirius positioned himself behind Remus, took his cock in his hand, and then slid the tip over the shiny skin of Remus's arse. He teased Remus's entrance with it, pressing slightly but not going in. Remus let out a squeak and pushed his hips back. Sirius took pity on him and pushed inside, his cock breaching Remus before slowly sinking in. Remus was wet and tight, his velvety heat welcoming Sirius into it, and Sirius kept going, slow and steady, watching how Remus's hole stretched to allow him entry. Remus whimpered, pushing back onto Sirius's cock, and Sirius gripped his hips, not to hold him back, just to have something to hold on to. When Sirius's hips met Remus's arse, Remus didn't allow them a moment to adjust before he was already moving his hips. It was hot, and Sirius let him do it by himself for a moment, just watching how Remus fucked himself on Sirius's cock. Remus smelled amazing, a heady mixture of his slick and the earthiness of his scent, and Sirius could no longer hold back, but pulled his hips back only to immediately push them back in. Remus moaned quietly, and Sirius started a steady pace, which he couldn't keep up for very long, with Remus's gasps and whimpers spurring him on until he was fucking into Remus so hard their skins were slapping together. It was hot. There was something different about the knowledge that they were doing it because Remus wanted to. Sirius had never realized what kind of bumper the money had been between them until now that it was gone. He fucked Remus as his knot swelled, and Remus met each of his thrusts enthusiastically. Sirius slid his hand under Remus and took his cock in his hand, stroking fast, which made Remus whine. Sirius's knot lodged inside Remus, and he rutted against his arse until he came a moment later, moaning as he filled Remus with his seed, his orgasm seeming to last forever. Once it was over, he realized he had stopped stroking Remus, which he resumed in a rush, wanting to push Remus over the edge too. Remus was panting, and when he came, he let out a grunt as his hole pulsed around Sirius and his cock kicked, spilling onto the sheets. They lay down on their sides, Sirius pulling Remus into his arms. Remus smelled pleased, and Sirius placed his hand on his tummy.
That was amazing.
Remus said, still slightly out of breath.
Do you think it was enough to satisfy you?
I really fucking hope so. I've been needing to get off more than once a day, and it's getting so tiresome at this point.
Should we meet more often so that I can fuck you?
Sirius stroked Remus's tummy.
Maybe you really just need a real knot. Have you been using knotting toys?
I have, but they're not really the same thing as a real knot. You can never really get a big enough toy because the knot never goes down, so it needs to be small enough to fit through.
Oh yeah, I've never really thought about how knotting toys work.
I think they make inflatable ones too, but I would be too worried that it will burst inside me.
That wouldn't be fun.
Sirius moved his head into a better position to sniff Remus's scent straight from his gland.
Would you actually have time to see me more often to knot me?
Remus asked.
Well, if we only saw each other for knotting, I think I could arrange it on most days.
It would only take about an hour, or what do you think?
I've never timed it. I guess if we were efficient, an hour would be long enough. Would you like to try to meet every day for a knotting?
Remus leaned back against Sirius and placed his hand over his hand.
I would very gladly try. It's been hell trying to live like this.
You should have said something sooner.
I didn't think you would want to pay me that much.
Sirius didn't immediately know what to say. A part of him had already forgotten that he had been paying Remus for sex up until only an hour earlier.
Well, now you won't need to worry about that,
Sirius said.
Yeah.
Remus snuggled closer, and Sirius pressed a kiss onto his shoulder. He hoped that he really could make time for Remus every day, especially because it sounded like Remus physically needed it. Sirius had heard that some Omegas got uncontrollably horny during their second trimester, but he hadn't thought to ask Remus if he was one of those Omegas. Would Remus even have told him? He hadn't known about Sirius's feelings, so he had viewed their relationship only from the context of getting paid for sex. Maybe your sugar daddy wasn't someone you went to when you had problems. Why hadn't Remus found someone else? Remus could have any alpha he liked, so why hadn't he? Was it because he had feelings for Sirius? Had he had feelings ever since the start? Or maybe he had had other alphas, but Sirius hadn't known about them. How would Sirius have known when they had only seen each other a couple of times a month? You couldn't tell from pictures if someone had been with Remus. Maybe he had had someone to help him take the photos. Sirius unconsciously tightened his hold on Remus. He didn't like the idea that someone else had been involved in the photos Remus had sent him.
You smell different.
Remus said,
Sorry, I'm having some kind of weird surge of possessiveness. I think it's because you're carrying my child.
Remus huffed a laugh.
It's happened before too, but only after you got pregnant.
I didn't know that. I've never smelled it on you.
It happened during sex, so it probably wasn't strong enough to affect my scent.
Oh.
Remus clenched around Sirius's cock, but it was hard to say if he had done it on purpose. His scent told Sirius nothing.
I don't want to be some kind of possessive Burke,
Sirius said.
If you at any point feel like I'm going overboard, please tell me.
I will.
Remus squeezed Sirius's hand.
I promise I will.
It felt good to know. Chapter 7. Day 167. When Sirius had gone to Remus's for their daily nodding, Remus had smelled frazzled, urgent, and had immediately guided Sirius into the bedroom, and Sirius had fucked him into the mattress. Remus's scent had settled by the time they lay together, Sirius's knot snug inside him, and Sirius idly drew shapes onto Remus's tummy. It was a peaceful moment, something that Sirius had desperately needed after the day he'd had. He hadn't even known if he would have time to see Remus that day, having had to unexpectedly travel to London and spending all day in meetings and getting admonished by Regulus about things that were out of his control. They'd had a proper argument, and Sirius had left Regulus's office in a huff, slamming the door and getting looks from the employees who happened to be nearby. Sirius snuggled closer to Remus to breathe in his soothing scent. Remus had got stretch marks on his tummy, and Sirius hadn't been able to stop touching them. Remus had been shy about it, but Sirius loved them. He truly did. He hoped that Remus wouldn't feel bad about them for a long time, that maybe the way Sirius treated them would help him see that there was nothing bad about stretch marks. Something else new was Remus's quietness during sex. He used to moan freely, but ever since they got together, Remus had been quiet, only letting out the occasional moan. Being loud must have been yet another part of his role, and Sirius was glad that Remus now got to act more natural during sex. Sirius couldn't imagine having to put on a show for sex. Their relationship had started well. They had been seeing each other daily, and it felt like something you did in a relationship. Sirius had been worried about Remus's money situation, though. Remus was used to having the income he got from Sirius, so if it suddenly stopped completely, he would have to make adjustments in his life, and Sirius didn't want him to need to do that, which was why he had suggested that Remus should take his credit card, which Remus had declined, and had made sure to give Remus a little bit of money to have everything he needed. They had seen each other for more than sex, too. They had gone on a few dates, and Remus had seemed to enjoy himself. Sirius had paid for everything, of course, because he didn't want Remus to need to spend his money on things that Sirius could easily cover. Sirius had enjoyed their dates immensely. Remus acted more subdued, didn't talk quite as much, but in return talked about a wider range of topics. And it made Sirius happy to know that Remus was truly allowing him to see him for who he was. The more Sirius got to know Remus, the more he liked him, and he could only hope that Remus felt the same for him. Suddenly, there was a flutter against Sirius's hand. He gasped and pressed down a bit more, trying to catch it again, but it was gone.
Was that the baby?
He asked.
Yeah, did you feel it?
I did.
Sirius kept his hand pressed against Remus's tummy, suddenly choked up by it. Remus was carrying his child. Remus was carrying life inside him, providing for the baby, protecting him, and Sirius snuggled as close to Remus as he could physically get, squeezing his eyes shut as he tried to hold back tears.
I felt it.
Remus reached back to stroke Sirius's hair before moving his hand down to hold the one Sirius had against his tummy.
I wish I could do more.
Sirius said,
What do you mean?
You're doing everything. You're carrying the whole pregnancy by yourself. There has to be something I could do to help.
You're currently helping me by fucking me when I need it. That honestly helps so much. Getting a real knot every day has considerably calmed me down, and I no longer feel like I need to crawl out of my own skin.
It didn't feel like enough, but Sirius didn't argue. He wasn't sure he could explain to Remus how he felt, how strong the need to carry him was.
Is there anything else I could do?
He asked.
Anything. Do you need something that I could buy you?
That's something I've been meaning to talk to you about.
What? Just tell me what you need, and I'll get it for you.
No.
No. What do you mean, no?
Remus sighed, his scent going slightly sour. Sirius had a bad feeling about it.
It still feels like you're paying me for sex.
Remus said,
Oh my God. That's not how I've meant to make you feel at all.
Yeah, I didn't think you did. It's just that you pay for everything. You give me money, and you tried to give me your credit card again, and it just feels the same as it did before, that you're buying my company.
That's not how I've meant it at all.
Remus nodded. Sirius was horrified that he had managed to make Remus feel like that. How could he change things? What would make Remus feel more comfortable?
I don't want you to give me any more money.
Remus said. It took a moment for Remus's words to register, but when they did, Sirius frowned, that he wouldn't give Remus any money at all. But how was Remus supposed to manage everything then? How much money did he make exactly? And how much would he have after he started his paternity leave?
But I want to help you.
Sirius said.
You don't need to help me.
But I need to pay for things for the baby. He's my baby too.
Yeah, but that's different. I don't want to take money from you for anything else.
Sirius really wanted to sigh, but instead he inhaled slowly, then exhaled even more slowly. He didn't know what to say. The silence stretched, and Remus's shoulders went tense.
Okay.
Sirius finally said.
I won't offer you money for anything but baby stuff.
Thank you.
Sirius didn't feel good about it. Day 186. Sirius was spooning Remus, his knot deep inside him, and he felt better than he had in a while. He had been constantly stressed about Remus's money situation, worried that Remus would have to go without things that he needed. But as he had stopped to think about it, he had figured that Remus had probably saved the money he'd got from him. Why else would Remus's furniture be so mismatched? Why else would he have not replaced some of his more worn-out clothes? And if he had saved most of what he had got from Sirius, that meant that he had a decent sum of money that he could use in case he needed something. Sirius's anxiety had been worse too, creeping up on him when he least expected it, and he didn't even know what caused it most of the time. But right now, cuddled up to Remus, he felt serene, and he refused to think about anything that might set his anxiety off.
Sirius.
Remus said quietly.
Yeah.
Remus was quiet for a moment. Sirius suddenly had a bad feeling.
What if I wanted to find another sugar daddy?
Remus asked. Sirius's stomach dropped, and a weight appeared on his chest. Remus's muscles were as tense as his scent, and Sirius automatically started stroking his tummy to calm him, despite his own muddled emotions. Sirius swallowed.
I think that's your choice to make. If you want another sugar daddy, then...
He couldn't finish his thought, and he hoped that Remus would finish it however he wanted to.
So, you would be okay with it?
Remus asked.
I can't tell you what to do and what not to do. It's your life, and you get to decide what you want to do.
It would only be a job.
Yeah, I know.
It wouldn't mean that I care less about you.
Yeah.
Remus's muscles were not relaxing. Sirius wished that he weren't stuck inside him. He really wanted to walk away for a moment to take a breather. Maybe drink a glass of water. A glass of water sounded really amazing, actually.
Be honest with me.
Remus said.
How would it make you feel?
Sirius bit his lip. What if Remus didn't really want him to be honest? What if he just wanted Sirius to confirm that it was okay?
Honestly?
Sirius asked.
Honestly?
It wouldn't feel great. Not because I don't want you to do the work you want to do, but because I think a part of it is just possessiveness because of the pregnancy.
And what's the other part?
Sirius didn't know how to word it, so as not to make it sound like he wanted to pay Remus for sex, so he remained quiet.
Remus
said and swallowed audibly.
I could really use the money.
Sirius unconsciously pulled Remus closer to him.
My phone broke.
Remus's voice wobbled.
I can't afford to replace it. But if I sold some pictures or something.
He sniffed, and then he suddenly smelled salty. Sirius held him as tightly as he dared, really wishing that he weren't stuck inside Remus so that he could see his face.
Oh, love,
he said softly.
Of course I'll buy you another phone when you so desperately need it. Please let me help you. I want to help you.
Remus let out a sob and Sirius kissed his nape.
Let me help you,
Sirius said.
Partners help each other when they need help.
Remus said nothing, only cried, and Sirius stroked his tummy, then his hair, pressing soft kisses onto his skin. Remus didn't cry for very long, but Sirius kept touching him softly even after his breathing evened out.
I'm sorry.
Remus then said,
Don't be sorry.
No, I'm so sorry I broke down like that. Things have been a bit rough. I haven't been able to sleep well, and I've been having this really annoying back pain that hasn't helped at all, and I'm just so tired. And then the fucking phone stopped working and...
Hey, it's okay. You don't need to explain.
Yes, I do.
Remus sniffled.
You don't. You're allowed to have bad days and get sad about stuff. I'm so sorry you're so stressed out right now, though. I'm sorry you're not sleeping well.
It sucks.
Sirius hummed and pressed a kiss onto Remus's shoulder.
What's been keeping you awake?
Every time I start falling asleep, I need to get up to go to the loo, and it's so hard to find a position that feels comfortable, and the backache doesn't help at all.
I'm so sorry. I wish I could switch places with you for a while.
Remus huffed.
That would be great until I needed to do your job.
Sirius laughed.
Okay.
Okay, what?
Okay, you can buy me a new phone.
Thank you.
Thank me.
Remus turned his head to look at Sirius with a frown.
I should be the one thanking you.
I'm glad I can help you, so I definitely need to thank you for letting me.
Remus rolled his eyes before turning away again.
Let me know which phone you want, and I'll go and pick it up for you tomorrow.
Okay.
Any phone you want. Don't think about the price.
Sirius knew Remus was going to think about the price, but at least Remus knew that Sirius didn't care about stuff like that.
Remus.
Yeah.
Just out of curiosity, and I'm not trying to judge at all.
Yeah.
What have you been doing with the money I've paid you?
Remus shifted.
Are you trying to ask me if I have it hidden somewhere and could buy a new phone?
No. I'm just curious because you haven't bought new furniture.
Remus huffed derisively.
Furniture isn't that important.
I'm not trying to say it is. I'm just genuinely curious. You don't need to tell me. It's none of my business. I'm sorry I asked.
Sirius squeezed Remus a bit to convey how sincere he was, and then they were quiet. The silence hung heavy above them, making things uncomfortable, and Sirius really wished he hadn't asked.
I've been paying off my student loan.
Remus suddenly said,
Oh, I'm glad you've been able to do that.
Yeah.
Do you have enough money to keep paying it off?
Yeah, it means I don't have money to buy a new phone.
You don't need to explain.
Sirius hesitated, but then decided to say,
I know you don't want to take money from me, but if you ever need it for any reason, please let me know. I want to help you when you need it.
Remus nodded, but said nothing.
Is there anything nice that has happened lately?
Sirius asked.
The baby has hiccups sometimes. It feels funny.
Yeah, I wish I could feel it.
It's reassuring to feel him move around. I love it.
It sounds wonderful.
They went quiet. Sirius tried to imagine feeling a baby moving inside him, but it was such an alien thought that he couldn't. He held his palm against Remus's tummy, so deep in thought that he didn't even notice when his knot started going down. He only snapped back to reality when his cock slipped out of Remus.
"Oh,"
he said.
"I didn't even notice my knot was going down."
Remus didn't respond. Sirius raised himself up on his elbow to see Remus's face. Remus was fast asleep. Sirius smiled. He pulled the duvet over them and settled back down. Remus really needed the sleep, so Sirius would let him sleep until he absolutely needed to wake him up to ask him if he needed to go home or if he could spend the night. Maybe they should start meeting at Remus's flat so that Remus wouldn't need to travel home if he fell asleep. Chapter 8. Day 198. When Remus had hit his third trimester, it was almost as if a switch had been flipped, and he no longer needed to be knotted every day. That was good because they spent Christmas separately, Remus with his family and Sirius with the Potters. What wasn't so good was that they hadn't seen each other every day since Remus had stopped requiring a knot. Sirius had already got used to seeing Remus almost daily, and the time he now spent alone in his flat felt lonely and cold. Sirius returned to Cardiff after Christmas and immediately got back to work. It was only the second day after his return that he was already slightly falling apart. He had never been good with taking time off work, but having taken Christmas off, just to please James, had done something to him. He had been less anxious over the holiday. He had talked to Remus on the phone for an hour both days, and something inside him had settled that was now muddled again. He had to do something. So the moment he finished the meeting he was in, he cleared out his schedule for the rest of the day, which would undoubtedly make Regulus yell at him again, and left the flat. He didn't really know where he was going. He merely strolled around, and a turn around a corner led him straight to a shop that sold baby things. He stopped outside, looking at the things in the window, and then went in. The shop was lovely and warm after the chilly outside, and he took his gloves off as he made his way around, looking at everything and feeling slightly overwhelmed as he didn't know what the baby would need. What kind of toys would a newborn need? Sirius didn't even know what Remus had bought for the baby, other than the things they had bought together. Maybe he should ask. Maybe he should take Remus to the shop, and then they could find things to buy together. Sirius paused by a shelf full of stuffed animals, and his eyes were drawn to a group of teddy bears. They looked very traditional, with their fluffy beige fur, the bottoms of their feet and the insides of their ears a more yellow-toned plush, a cream-colored ribbon tied neatly into a bow around their necks. There was nothing particularly exciting about them, but somehow they tugged on Sirius's heartstrings. He picked one up. It had a chocolate-brown nose and eyes, not buttons but sewn into the fabric, which Sirius knew made it appropriate for a baby because there was no chance of a button falling off. Its mouth was mostly hidden under the fur, but it had a friendly appearance. Sirius bought it. He walked out of the shop with a white paper bag, a little smile on his lips, feeling light. He was going to have a baby, and he was buying his baby things, and actually, it would be so wonderful to be a parent.
Sirius.
Sirius raised his head and his smile disappeared as he met the eyes of Lyle Lupin. Lyle looked at the shop Sirius had just walked out of before looking at the bag Sirius was carrying, the shop's logo on its side.
Buying something for the baby?
Lyle asked.
"Yes."
Lyle nodded. There was something cold in his gaze, and Sirius dreaded to hear what he was going to say next. He wished he had taken longer to pick the bear, that he had looked at everything with a bit more interest, so that it would have taken him longer to get out of the shop, and he wouldn't have run into Lyle.
That's how it's always going to be, isn't it?
Lyle said.
You're buying things for the baby because you won't have time to do anything else. When he grows older, he won't know you as his father, but as the guy who buys his affection with toys.
Sirius said nothing. There was nothing to say, because Lyle was right. That was exactly what would happen. Sirius would never be able to be in his child's life the way he deserved, and the child would grow up only knowing that Sirius would always leave. A snowflake floated down between them, and when Sirius glanced away from Lyle, he saw that there were more, slowly making their way towards the ground. When he looked back at Lyle, Lyle was looking at him sternly. He was shorter than Sirius, but at that moment, Sirius felt small and insignificant.
You don't even live together,
Lyle said.
The baby will never see you.
It was true. If Sirius wanted to see the baby, he would have to go to Remus's and then go back home. How much time would he get to spend with him? Remus would be responsible for taking care of the baby at night and all day long, and Sirius would pop by for an hour or two.
I know you and Remus are now attempting a relationship, but do you really think it will work?
Lyle asked.
You're still as busy with work as you were before. Maybe you shouldn't be in the baby's life at all. That might be better than being unreliably sometimes there.
Sirius still said nothing.
You should break things off with Remus as soon as possible, so that he has time to plan.
Sirius remained quiet.
Have a good New Year.
Lyle said, but his voice revealed that he didn't really mean it. He nodded at Sirius and turned to go without waiting for a response. Sirius stood there for a long time as occasional flakes of snow fell to the ground where they melted immediately. He then turned and walked back home, more and more snow falling from the sky, and his eyes burned. By the time he got home, he felt as if he were choking. He carefully placed the bag on the chest of drawers before taking off his jacket and shoes and wandering upstairs to the kitchen, where he stopped. He was thirsty, but it felt impossible to drink when his throat felt so tight. Instead of getting water, he went to the drinks cabinet, which was almost empty because he hadn't had time to drink, and reached for the bottle of cognac he had got as a gift from a business partner in France. Sirius sat down on the sofa with the bottle and a glass and poured himself a generous drink. He sipped it slowly, unable to stop himself from pulling a face every time the liquid touched his tongue. He hated cognac, which was why it was the bottle that was still left, but the more he drank, the less disagreeable it tasted. He sat slumped, holding the glass in his hand, resting it on the armrest as he stared into nothingness. Everything Lyle had said was true, and there was a heavy weight in Sirius's stomach as he thought about it all. And about Remus. Remus deserved better. Remus deserved a partner who could see him more reliably, who could be there to help him raise his child. Sirius wasn't that person. Sirius was a terrible alpha, unable to take care of his omega. Even though Remus really wasn't his, Remus was his boyfriend of just over a month, and just so happened to also be the father of his child. Sirius had made a considerable dent into his cognac by the time he picked up his phone and dialed a number he hated calling.
What is it?
Came Regulus's response.
Aren't you a joy to talk to?
I'm busy.
I won't take much of your time. I just called to let you know that I quit.
What?
I said that I'm quitting my job.
Regulus didn't immediately say anything, and Sirius congratulated himself on managing to render him speechless.
You can't just quit.
Regulus finally said,
I can, and I did. I'm going to be a family man. I can't be spending 14 hours a day doing work and traveling across Europe whenever necessary.
Not this again. You have been absolutely insufferable for the past 3 months with this family nonsense.
Maybe you should dig the stick out of your arse and understand that the world doesn't revolve around money.
Yes, it does.
Sirius huffed because Regulus was partially right.
In any case, you won't need to deal with my insufferableness any longer.
You can't quit just like that. Your job is necessary for the business.
Find someone else to do it. How about Fenwick? He's due for a promotion.
You're the co-owner. You can't just leave.
I'll happily sell my share to you, or to anyone willing to pay for it. I'll have to put some feelers out and...
No, you're not selling your share to some rando.
I didn't know you knew the word rando.
Sirius could practically hear Regulus grinding his teeth in anger.
Anyway,
He said,
I won't be available for the company any longer. Have a good life.
You're not.
Sirius hung up before he could hear what Regulus was trying to say. Regulus immediately tried to call him, but he hung up on him before blocking his number. He wouldn't leave it blocked for good, but he would take a couple of Regulus free days before dealing with him again. The heavy weight inside him had lightened considerably. Day 201.
Hi.
Sirius said, his face immediately melting into a smile as he saw Remus behind his door.
Hello.
Remus got in, and they kissed before hugging. Sirius loved how Remus's tummy felt against him when they hugged, and after they pulled apart, he let his hand find Remus's tummy to rest against it, feeling a surge of possessiveness. They went upstairs and Remus sat down on the sofa with a sigh. Sirius picked up the paper bag that had been sitting on the coffee table and handed it to Remus.
I got something for the baby,
he said. Remus looked at him before taking the bag and peeking inside. His lips spread into a smile as he fished out the teddy, and he held it in both hands, looking at it as if it were the most precious thing he had ever seen.
A teddy for our Teddy?
Sirius said.
Oh, are we calling the baby Teddy now?
I believe I just did.
Remus laughed. He let his thumb brush over the teddy bear's nose and eyes before stroking its cheek. Sirius watched him, feeling a sense of accomplishment for having bought something that made Remus look at it with such affection.
Thank you.
Remus said and turned to look at Sirius.
It's absolutely perfect.
Sirius leaned in to place a kiss onto Remus's lips. Remus smiled, looked at the bear for a moment longer, and then put it back into the bag.
Speaking of babies,
He said,
the antenatal class starts next week.
Yes, I remember.
You don't need to come if you're very busy. It'll be okay.
I will come. Of course, I need to be there to learn how to take care of the baby.
But if you're very busy, I can just tell you what they taught me.
I quit my job.
Remus's mouth was open, but nothing came out. He closed his mouth, staring at Sirius as if he had never seen him before.
I quit my job.
Sirius repeated. Remus stared at him for a moment longer in silence before incredulously asking,
Why?
Because I don't want to be an absent father.
Is this about what Tad said? He was so out of line.
He was right, though. My job kept me way too busy to be a good father. Think about it. We haven't been able to reliably see each other every day. And when we have, it's been about an hour before you've gone back home. If I'm the one coming to you, it will be even less because I need to account for the travel time, which isn't that long by car, but still enough to make a dent into my schedule. How am I supposed to father a child if I can't even see him every day?
Are you sure you want to quit?
Yes, I want to be able to fully support you. I can't bear the thought of you having to do everything yourself. I want to be there.
But your job was everything to you.
Now my family's everything to me. I'd much rather have that.
Remus looked at Sirius in silence, his eyes searching for something. Sirius let him look.
What are you going to do instead of working?
Remus asked.
I haven't thought of that yet.
When did you quit?
3 days ago.
Remus nodded, his eyes still on Sirius's face and brow slightly furrowed.
There's another thing that I've been thinking about,
Sirius said.
What is it?
I think things would be easier if we lived together.
Remus puckered his lips before relaxing them again, but he said nothing.
You don't need to say yes if you don't feel comfortable with it. I just want you to know that if you want it, at any point, I'm willing to live with you.
Would I be moving here?
There's enough room in this flat for the both of us and the baby, so it would make sense, yes.
I would feel really weird living somewhere this fancy.
So weird you wouldn't be able to.
Remus shrugged.
We could find someplace else if it makes you uncomfortable to live here.
I'll think about it.
Please do. And don't feel pressured into it, okay? We'll do whatever makes you comfortable.
Remus nodded but said nothing.
Do you want something to drink? I got you some alcohol-free sparkling wine, but I also have Coke.
Sparkling wine sounds fantastic, thank you. What will you drink?
Will it bother you if I drink alcohol?
No.
I have a bottle of champagne.
Remus raised his brows and Sirius laughed awkwardly.
James sent it to me when I told him I quit my job.
He said,
I'm not much of a champagne person.
Too bad I can't try it.
I'll buy you a bottle once you're no longer pregnant.
Remus smiled. They sipped their drinks on the sofa, turned towards each other, and Remus wore a gentle smile on his face. Sirius felt light as he leaned his arm against the backrest and brought his glass to his lips.
I'm honestly a bit surprised that you wanted to spend New Year's with me.
He said,
Why? You're my boyfriend. Of course I want to spend it with you.
Yeah, but we haven't been together for very long. I thought you'd want to spend it with friends.
Remus looked away and bit his lip.
You didn't ditch your friends just to be with me, did you?
Remus shook his head.
No.
Then what's with that face?
Remus sighed. Sirius reached in to touch his arm.
I don't have the kinds of friends I would want to have a party with.
Remus said quietly.
You don't?
Not here, anyway.
How come?
Remus was quiet for a long moment before he sighed again.
I'm not good at making friends. I don't quite understand how it works. I'm not great with social situations.
But you've always been so good with me.
It was easier with you because I was pretending to be someone else. But if I'm trying to make friends, I just have to be myself. And I'm not good at it.
But you're no longer putting on a role with me, right?
Right. But I had already known you for 2 years, so you were already familiar to me.
Sirius didn't know what to say. He didn't think Remus really was bad at making friends. He was almost certain that was just Remus's insecurity talking. But his insecurity must be bad enough to keep him from making friends. It made Sirius sad to think about Remus alone.
Don't you have anyone?
Sirius asked.
I have a friend back in London. We text every day, and I have a couple of others online, but they live abroad, so I can't meet them. And I have my co-workers, most of whom are really lovely people, but they're not really friends.
That makes me so sad. You deserve to have a big friend group.
Remus smiled bitterly before sipping his drink.
This is good. Was it expensive?
Not particularly.
Remus nodded.
Have you thought of trying to find friends online? Who would live here?
I don't think that will work.
You could give it a try anyway. You never know. Maybe the right person is waiting for you.
Now you make it sound like I'm trying to find a boyfriend.
Sirius barked out a laugh.
Hopefully you're happy enough with me.
Remus smiled.
I am.
Sirius smiled so widely that his cheeks hurt. The champagne was quickly making Sirius tipsy, which was nice because it eased up the tightness that he carried in his chest. It wasn't that noticeable when he was around Remus, but still there, still making him feel uncomfortable in his own skin. Remus had been more moderate with his wine, sipping it slowly and at times forgetting about it completely in favor of talking to Sirius or gazing at him gently. Remus was so wonderful. Sirius wanted to gather him in his arms and cradle him, hold him so gently, so gently. He wished there were a way for him to get Remus friends, but he wasn't particularly good at making friends either. Or maybe it was less about whether he knew how to make friends and more about how he hadn't had time for it. It was a small miracle that James was still in his life after he had been neglecting everything but his work for so long. When it got close to midnight, they turned off the lights and relocated to the balcony door to look out. The city was lit up in the darkness, and Sirius felt calm for once. He felt like he belonged there, and he took Remus's hand in his other hand holding his glass. He drank. At midnight, the fireworks started. Sirius looked at it for a moment, but his eyes then diverted to Remus, who was looking out with a smile, his eyes taking in the flashes of light. He looked wonderful, his hair grown slightly out of shape, his nose with a little bump on the bridge, his lips spread into a smile. His chest had grown considerably since summer, and his tummy was big, and Sirius wanted to get down on his knees to kiss it, to press his ear against it and listen.
Happy New Year.
Sirius said softly as a flash of light colored Remus's face green. Remus turned to look at Sirius. He slipped his hand behind Sirius's head and pulled him down into a kiss. Sirius wrapped his arm around Remus's waist, his glass slightly in the way, and they kissed, long and dirty.
Happy New Year.
Remus said as they pulled apart.
I think we should have celebratory sex.
Sirius laughed.
I agree.
They stopped for long enough for Sirius to take their bottles into the fridge before they headed down into the bedroom. Remus smelled amazing, and Sirius stuck his nose right against his scent gland to inhale the intoxicating scent. His cock was quickly growing hard, and he wrapped his arms around Remus to pull him closer. It was wonderful. It was tender. As Sirius fucked Remus slowly, Remus allowed himself to moan quietly, and Sirius wished they were face to face so that he could kiss him. His hand found Remus's chest, his lips found Remus's shoulders, and once they were lying down, knotted together, Sirius felt the happiest he had felt in a while. Chapter 9. Day 214. Sirius knew it was ridiculous, but he couldn't quite stop himself from feeling like a failure as he sat at the doctor's office and talked about his mental health. He had beat his anxiety in his early 30s, so why was it back? Was he too weak to be healthy? Why hadn't things improved after he made changes in his life? The doctor wrote him a prescription, and he immediately went to pick it up from the pharmacy. When he made it home, he placed the package onto the kitchen counter and stared at it. He hadn't been on medication in such a long time. Did he really need it? He stopped to listen to his body. There was a weight on his chest and something odd in his stomach, his brain trying to grab hold of a thought that he couldn't quite reach. And maybe that was for the better, considering how many odd fears he had had lately, such as tripping on his own feet and falling in front of a car. He swallowed a pill. Sirius went to Remus's for a change. It wasn't that he didn't want to go there. Sirius's flat just was bigger and more comfortable in that way, although there was a certain coziness to Remus's flat. Sirius especially loved Remus's bed, which was somehow more comfortable than his own, and because it was Remus's bed, it felt more intimate. Sirius absolutely loved fucking Remus in his own bed, and that should be enough to make him go over there more often. It sometimes felt like Remus didn't want him there, though, and Sirius suspected Remus was embarrassed by how much smaller his flat was compared to Sirius's two-story penthouse.
Hi.
He said and grinned when Remus opened the door.
Hello, come in.
Remus stepped aside to let Sirius in and then led Sirius to the lounge.
Do you want something to drink?
Maybe some tea?
Remus put the kettle on, and Sirius watched him. It was funny how Sirius didn't notice Remus growing bigger because of how often they saw each other, but when he thought back to what Remus had looked like a month earlier, the difference was stark. It was still sometimes hard to comprehend that Remus was pregnant, even though the proof was staring him in the face. They sat on the sofa with their cups of tea. Remus didn't have a coffee table, so Sirius held the mug carefully so as not to burn himself. Remus looked at him with a smile.
How was work?
Sirius asked.
Nothing unusual. It's getting harder now that I feel so achy all the time and need to sit down often.
I imagine that's not easy.
Remus nodded.
How was your day?
Sirius's first instinct was to lie.
Oh, nothing out of the ordinary. Same old, same old.
It would be so much easier to just lie, but that would be unfair to Remus. Sirius might not be the most experienced in relationships, but he knew that partners were supposed to talk to each other about their issues.
I went to the doctor's today.
He said.
Oh,
Remus's brow furrowed in worry.
what for? Is everything okay?
Well, no. I used to have anxiety back when I was younger.
How much younger?
My teens and all through my 20s. It got better in my early 30s, though, and I haven't been on medication for a couple of years now.
Remus nodded.
So why the doctor?
Sirius sighed and looked away.
The anxiety has been coming back.
I'm sorry to hear that. How long has it been?
I'm not even sure. I got used to pushing it away, and it was easy to forget when I was so busy, but then it kept getting worse and worse.
How bad is it now?
Bad enough that I can't ignore it. I got some pills for it.
That's good.
Sirius nodded. He glanced at Remus, who was looking at him openly.
Why haven't you talked about it before?
Remus asked.
I don't know. I guess I was kind of hoping that if I don't acknowledge it, it will go away.
I don't think that's how anxiety works.
Well, I sure wish it did.
Remus huffed. Sirius bit his lip and raised his mug to his lips. He tried a sip, but the tea was still way too hot to drink.
What are you anxious about?
Remus asked.
I don't know. Sometimes there's no clear cause.
And when there is?
I've been having these really strange fears about getting hurt. The other day, when it was windy and I was walking past trees, I suddenly worried that a tree would fall on me. You know, exactly like trees fall on people every single day.
Sirius laughed derisively.
I don't understand where those fears come from.
That sounds really annoying to have to deal with.
That it is.
Remus paused for a moment before he asked.
Are there any other things you're anxious about?
Sirius debated not saying anything, but then he glanced at Remus, who was looking at him so sincerely, his big eyes so beautiful, that Sirius couldn't lie.
I also get anxious about your well-being,
He said quietly.
and about becoming a father. What if I don't know how to do it? What if I'm just like my parents? I would never want that for my child.
What were your parents like?
Sirius realized that he had never talked to Remus about his family. It wasn't a conversation he particularly wanted to get into, but he would have to at some point, wouldn't he? He owed Remus the context of his upbringing.
My parents,
He said slowly, trying to figure out the best way to explain.
they weren't good parents. They weren't good people either. Father was always working, so I barely saw him, and when I did, he was tense and short with me and Regulus. He would threaten us with a caning, but he never actually did it. He once got close to doing it, but I ran away from home before he could.
You ran away from home for how long?
For good. I went to James's and his family took me in.
Then how come you're in your family business?
Mother sent me a letter after I'd left, saying that they had disinherited me, but when Father died, I found out that I was actually never disinherited, so I owned half of the company. I didn't actually start working there before Mother died, though, because I genuinely did not want to have anything to do with her.
What was she like?
Sirius sipped his tea. It was still a bit too warm for his taste, but that didn't matter when he needed to take a moment. He could feel Remus watching him, and a glance at Remus's mug told him that Remus hadn't touched his tea at all, even though he usually drank his hotter than Sirius did.
She would tell me that she loved me,
Sirius said.
but she never acted like it. She was obsessed with making me the perfect heir, expected me to dress a certain way, to behave a certain way, and when I didn't, she got angry. I was always wrong. I was never the son she wanted me to be, that she expected me to be. And she would say foul things, and then later she would apologize and tell me that if I didn't behave so out of line, she wouldn't need to say those things to me.
I'm sorry, that sounds awful. All of that.
Sirius shrugged.
Sometimes she pulled my hair, or pressed her nails into my shoulder, but that's not a big deal.
Remus was quiet. When Sirius turned to look at him, his brow was deeply furrowed and his eyes were sad.
That's not nothing.
Remus said,
That's awful. She shouldn't have done that.
It's okay, no biggie.
It's not no biggie. Just think about it this way. If I told you that my mam had done that to me when I was a kid, how would that sound to you? And what if someone did that to Teddy? How would you feel?
Something inside Sirius cracked open. He blinked his eyes hard and turned away so that Remus wouldn't notice. If someone did that to Teddy, if someone had done that to Remus, it would be horrible. It would be awful. But they weren't serious. Surely there had been something that Sirius had done to deserve it.
Have you ever talked to anyone about your family?
Remus asked.
I just did.
Sirius mumbled.
Yeah, but I meant a professional.
Sirius shook his head.
Maybe you should.
Sirius didn't react. From the corner of his eye, he saw Remus put his mug on the floor before he scooted closer and wrapped his arms around Sirius.
Thank you for telling me.
He said, and rested his head on Sirius's shoulder.
Thank you for trusting me with it.
Sirius closed his eyes and swallowed. He hadn't really allowed himself to think about it, but it was true that he worried he would become his own parents. What if he wouldn't know how to do things differently? What if being cold and mean was something that came to him naturally? What if he didn't know how to love Teddy?
Do you want to fuck?
He asked. Remus snorted and pulled back. Sirius turned to look at him to find him wearing an amused expression.
Sure.
Remus said.
Just a tiny little hiccup.
What is it? Is everything okay?
Remus grimaced.
I have hemorrhoids, so no anal for now.
Oh no, I'm so sorry. I wish I could magic them away.
Remus smiled. He reached in and took Sirius's mug from his hands before lowering it to the floor next to his own mug. With a mischievous smile, he got off the sofa and knelt down in front of Sirius. Sirius's cock twitched at the thought of having Remus's mouth on him. Blowjobs were something they hadn't done very often, because they either hadn't had the time for a long session of sex, or because Sirius had been too eager to be inside Remus. But suddenly having Remus knelt between his legs was the best thing ever. And it turned out to be the best thing that had happened to him all week. Remus's mouth was clever, and he kept looking up at Sirius with his big eyes, and Sirius carted his fingers through his hair before gripping it, his knot swelling under Remus's hand. When he came, Remus sucked him dry, squeezing the knot with his hand. Remus pulled off. There was spit on his chin and a strand of something between his lower lip and the tip of Sirius's cock, but it snapped when Remus pulled back further.
You're amazing,
Sirius said.
You're wonderful.
Remus grinned.
Get up here, I want to kiss you.
Remus pushed himself up with some effort and sat on the sofa next to Sirius, his hand still around Sirius's knot. Sirius cupped his cheek with his hand and kissed him, tasting himself on Remus's tongue.
I'll suck you too,
he said before sucking Remus's lower lip into his mouth. Remus whined.
What about your knot?
I'll hold it myself.
Remus squeezed, and Sirius couldn't stop his hips from pushing up into his hand. Sirius nudged on Remus's hand and gripped his knot when Remus let go. He got on the floor as Remus pulled down his trousers and pants, his lovely cock hard and leaking. Before Sirius could lean in, however, Remus swore.
I'll get slick on the sofa,
he said.
Can we go into bed?
Of course.
Sirius got up with some effort, his knees creaking as he did, and it was probably better for his body to be in bed rather than kneeling on the floor. They went upstairs, Remus waddling a bit on the stairs. Would it become too difficult for him to take the stairs as the pregnancy progressed? It was too bad that Sirius's flat was two-story too. They went into the bedroom, and Sirius squeezed his knot as he watched Remus get undressed, exposing his wonderful body for Sirius to see. Remus got on the bed, and Sirius wanted to spend time worshiping his body, but it was difficult with his hand occupied with his own knot, so he merely lay down between Remus's legs and took him in his mouth. Sirius had only ever sucked Remus a handful of times, and he very much regretted it. It was wonderful to have Remus in his mouth, to taste the saltiness of him, to feel his silky length sliding in and out. Sirius's knot started going down so he could free his hand, making it easier for him to get into it. And when Remus came, he let out the cutest little mule, and Sirius was very pleased with himself. Day 233. Sirius had spent most of the day lying on the sofa, as he had the previous one, and the one before that. The TV was on, but he wasn't watching. He occasionally scrolled through his social media, occasionally looked at the news, but mostly he just lay there. His anxiety had been better with the medication. He hadn't used it for very long yet, but so far it seemed to have alleviated the worst symptoms. That was great. It truly was. Somehow, it just didn't feel like it. Sirius was still in his pajamas when the doorbell rang, startling him. He looked at his phone to realize that it was late enough for Remus to have left work and come to him. Shit. Sirius got up, hesitated, but then jogged down the stairs and went to open the door. It would take him too long to get dressed first, and then Remus would ask questions. Well, he would probably still ask questions.
Hello.
Remus said when Sirius opened the door. His eyes traveled over Sirius's body from head to toe before returning to Sirius's face.
A long morning, huh?
Something like it.
Remus nodded, and Sirius let him in.
I'll get dressed,
Sirius said.
You don't need to if you're more comfortable in your pajamas.
Sirius hesitated. He would prefer to be dressed in front of Remus, but he wasn't sure why the idea of being only in his pajamas made him feel so vulnerable.
I don't think I've ever seen you in your pajamas,
Remus said.
Why haven't I slept over? Why haven't you slept over?
Sirius shrugged.
We should. Next weekend, maybe.
That would be lovely. Would you like to come here? Spend the entire weekend?
Sounds perfect. We should be spending more time together if we're considering moving in together.
Have you been thinking about it?
Remus nodded. They headed upstairs.
I was thinking that we should be spending more time in one of our flats.
Remus said.
I mean, days at a time. Something that would help us see if we're compatible to live together.
That makes sense.
But let's start with a weekend.
Yeah.
Remus sat down on the sofa and looked at the TV.
Were you watching this?
Sirius looked at the TV too, unsure what was even on. It seemed to be a documentary about Spice Girls, and he raised his eyebrows at that. He could feel Remus looking at him, so he huffed a laugh.
No,
he said.
I just had it on.
I see. What were you watching before?
Nothing really.
Remus looked at Sirius with furrowed brows, and Sirius looked away.
Do you want something to drink?
He asked.
I could have a cup of tea, please.
Coming right up.
Sirius went to the kitchen and got the kettle on. He searched his cupboard for tea and realized that he had run out. Great. What kind of host was he? Not even having any tea. Remus would be so disappointed not to get tea. Sirius should go and buy some, but that meant that he needed to get dressed first, and then it would take him time to go to the grocery, and then Remus would be left waiting, and the water would go cold, and Sirius would need to boil it again. Sirius closed his eyes and counted to 10, willing the burning to disappear. It didn't work, so he counted to 10 another time, then another. The kettle boiled, but Sirius kept his eyes closed, counting to 10 over and over again, feeling at the brink of something big.
Sirius.
Sirius jumped and opened his eyes to find Remus standing there, watching him with a frown.
What's going on?
Remus asked. Sirius opened his mouth, but it took a moment before he managed to say,
I don't have tea, I'm sorry.
And then he burst into tears. He hid his face in his hands and heard Remus moving closer. Soon, Remus pulled him into a hug, and Sirius wrapped his arms around Remus, hiding his face in his hair instead. Remus held him as he did his best to pull himself together, focusing on how Remus's body felt against his own, and bit by bit, he calmed down. Even after his tears ran dry, he remained in Remus's arms, soaking up the warmth and the care as well as his soothing scent. He had never felt as cared for as Remus had always made him feel, which was probably due to his horrible track record of superficial relationships that fell apart after a month at most, and he had to swallow to keep his eyes from tearing up again.
What's up?
Remus asked softly.
I'm sorry, I don't know what came over me.
Remus pulled back enough to look Sirius in the face. Sirius met his gaze and hoped that he didn't look as miserable as he felt.
No one cries over tea for no reason,
Remus said. When Sirius said nothing, he added,
Let's go and sit down.
Remus pulled away from the hug took Sirius's hand and pulled him into the sitting room where they sat on the sofa. Remus pulled Sirius closer until Sirius cuddled up to him with a little sigh.
Talk to me.
Remus said.
There's nothing to say.
Don't lie, please.
Sirius sighed deeply. He didn't know what Remus wanted him to say. He didn't really know what he wanted to say. He didn't want to say anything. But then he thought about how he would feel if he found Remus crying over something as trivial as not having tea, and he would want to know what had caused it.
I don't know,
He said.
Lately everything's just felt so meh.
Everything.
Yeah, well, not you. Seeing you is the highlight of my days, but everything else is, I don't know.
Did you actually watch telly today?
No.
Are you in the habit of having it on, even though you're not watching?
No. Well, yes, but only this year.
Remus was quiet for a moment, stroking Sirius's shoulder slowly.
Are you in the habit of wearing your pajamas all day when you don't need to go anywhere?
No, I just didn't notice the passing of time today.
Sirius huddled closer to Remus. He wished that Remus wouldn't ask anything else. How embarrassing to let Remus know what a slob he had become.
Do you think you might be a bit depressed?
Remus asked.
Absolutely not.
Sirius rose from Remus's side to look at Remus.
I'm not depressed.
Would it be so bad if you were?
Sirius nodded.
I don't think so. I think it would be a normal reaction from you.
What do you mean?
You'd quit your job, which was your whole life. I know you said family matters to you more, but that's not something that you can do the same way you would do a job.
Sirius frowned.
I think you need something to do to ground you. Maybe you should get another job, one that wouldn't take up so much of your time, so you'd have plenty of family time, maybe part-time.
Could Remus be right? Was Sirius depressed? He had gone from working every day to doing nothing at all. Could that really be enough to make him depressed? It was true that he felt a bit unmoored with nothing to do with his time, but he had been trying his best to fill his days with something to do. He had been trying to figure out a hobby to do, but hadn't really found anything that would interest him. But maybe the issue was that he didn't even know what hobbies there were out there. He hadn't sat down and Googled a list of hobbies. Should he do that? He was hesitant to get another job, though. Even if it had fewer hours and less responsibility, would Sirius know how to be moderate with a job? Maybe if he didn't particularly enjoy the job. But he hadn't particularly really enjoyed his old job either. He had only liked the parts of it he was good at, which was the numbers and developing strategies. And he had been good at charming people into doing what he wanted them to do, but he had hated that part. It had always felt insidious.
What are you thinking about?
Remus asked. Sirius blinked and looked at Remus. What if Sirius was not meant to do a job moderately?
I don't know.
Sirius said.
What if I just end up where I started from?
You'll need to find a job that won't let you work too much overtime.
As if those exist.
Remus gave a crooked smile at that. Sirius cuddled up to him again, and Remus put his hand in his hair, combing his fingers through the strands, and it felt wonderful.
What if you found a job that you don't like so much?
Remus asked.
I thought of that too, but I didn't particularly like my old job either.
Oh, then why did you work so much?
Sirius shrugged.
I don't know how to slow down.
You definitely need to learn to wind down, but not this much. You should find a balance of doing stuff and resting.
Yeah.
You could find a hobby.
I don't know what I'd like to do.
What hobbies have you had previously?
Sirius thought back to before he had started working so much, but it had been such a long time that he couldn't quite remember what he had used to do. Ever since he had joined the workforce, he had done little else than work. Was that a bit sad?
I used to party.
He said.
That's not really a hobby.
No.
What did you like doing as a kid?
Reading.
Oh,
Remus shifted.
but you don't have any books.
Yeah, I didn't particularly want to read after I ran away from home, because of how that had been pretty much the only thing my parents allowed me to do. I felt the need to do the exact opposite of what they wanted, so I stopped reading.
But did you actually like it? Even if it was kind of forced upon you?
I guess so. They didn't let me read any really fun books, though.
You could read fun books now. Maybe you could find a book club to join. Then you would get to talk to people about the books too.
A book club sounded mildly horrifying, but Sirius didn't want to tell Remus that, so he merely hummed, allowing Remus to interpret that the way he wanted to.
You should make a list of every hobby you can think of, and then see if any of them interest you.
Remus said.
Yeah, I should do that.
Maybe you could volunteer somewhere. Would that make it feel more like a hobby and less like a job? I'm thinking maybe that would help you not to overdo it.
That's an interesting idea. I'll have to look into it.
They went quiet. Sirius allowed his thoughts to wander over the suggestions, but they didn't really stop at anything in particular. He would have to simply decide to do something about it the next day and then do it.
How's the pregnancy going?
Sirius asked.
You just asked me yesterday.
Yeah, but how's it going today?
Remus laughed and leaned down to kiss Sirius's hair.
The Braxton Hicks have been very annoying today. My back still hurts. So do my feet.
I'm sorry to hear that. I would definitely give you a foot rub if you let me.
Remus said nothing, but there was a clear tension in his arm and his scent. Sirius didn't know what it was about Sirius touching Remus's feet that made Remus so uncomfortable.
Only if you let me.
Sirius said.
You can say no.
Well, no for now.
Okay.
They were quiet for a moment.
Something new happened today.
Remus said.
Yeah.
I've started leaking colostrum.
Sirius perked up at that. He thought about Remus's tits, which he was conveniently resting his head on, leaking milk, and his cock twitched. He didn't know why it was such a hot idea, but it was, and he desperately wanted to tear Remus's top off to see for himself.
Oh,
he said, hoping to sound cool.
I hope they won't leak more. I don't want to always have my top wet around my nipples.
Sirius imagined Remus in a thin t-shirt, the fabric wet and see-through over his nipples. It was hot. He shifted a bit as his cock filled out more.
Would you let me see?
Sirius asked, and his voice came out breathier than he had intended.
You would want to.
Remus sounded confused, so Sirius sat up to look at him.
It sounds so hot,
he said.
Will you let me play with your nipples?
Remus blinked in surprise, his brows raising as his cheeks went pink.
Please.
Sirius asked and batted his lashes. Remus opened his mouth, but it took a moment before he said,
Yes.
Sirius grinned. They relocated to the bedroom, where Sirius stripped Remus naked, then got out of his pajamas as fast as was physically possible while Remus settled on the bed. Sirius climbed in after him, his hands immediately going to Remus's chest that had filled out over the months. He thumbed the nipples, making Remus squirm and gasp.
Do you think they'll give me some milk if I suck really hard?
Sirius asked, voice gravelly.
Oh fuck, you might need to give it a try.
Yes, I think I should.
Sirius leaned down to take a nipple into his mouth. He sucked, then licked, grazed it with his teeth, and then sucked again. He played with the nipple until a tiny amount of milk came out, and Sirius was only spurred on by it. He spent forever playing with Remus's chest, first one nipple, then the other, grateful for each droplet of milk he managed to tease out of them. Remus was a panting, groaning mess, and Sirius's hand found his cock to tease too. Remus moaned as he stroked his cock and sucked on his nipples, and Sirius's own cock ached so much it was almost unbearable. He had to stroke it occasionally, and when Remus let out an unusually loud moan, Sirius discovered that his knot was already swelling despite the minimal stimulation. Remus came with a whimper, spilling over Sirius's hand as Sirius sucked on his nipple. After he twitched violently, Sirius pulled back. Remus was panting, cheeks pink and hair disheveled as if he'd had his hand in it. He might have.
Do you want to get me off, baby?
Sirius asked.
Fuck yes.
Just use your hand, I'm really close.
Remus nodded. Sirius settled in front of him, and he reached in to wrap his fingers around Sirius's cock.
Fuck, you've almost knotted already.
He gasped as he rubbed Sirius's forming knot. Sirius whined.
Yes.
I can't believe you got so turned on by my nipples.
Sirius gasped as Remus sped up his hand.
I'll let you play with my nipples any time you want to.
Remus said. Sirius was panting, his hips pushing up to meet Remus's hand, and it didn't take much longer for him to come, spilling over Remus's hand and getting some on his tummy as Remus squeezed his knot hard. Sirius groaned as his cock pulsed, and when it was over, he felt wrung out, but in a good way. He opened his eyes and looked at Remus with a smile, and Remus grinned at him.
Do you want to lie down?
Remus asked.
Yeah.
Remus had to let go of Sirius's cock for them to lie down, and Sirius quickly squeezed the knot in his own hand. Remus's hand had felt better. Once they were lying down, Remus batted Sirius's hand away and squeezed his knot again, and Sirius sighed in pleasure. It felt so good to have his Omega's hand on his knot. How long did people usually date before they started talking about mating? Certainly longer than 3 months. Sirius knew that he was rushing into things, that in the grand scheme of things, their relationship was brand new despite Remus's advanced pregnancy, and they needed to take their time to figure out if they really worked as a couple. But that didn't stop him from fantasizing about waking up to Remus every morning, grazing his teeth over a mating mark on Remus's neck, showing the world that Remus was his.
Teddy's kicking.
Remus said. Sirius placed his hand on Remus's tummy, where Remus pointed, and after a moment, there was a kick against his palm. It made him smile, it made his chest feel light, and he looked at Remus in wonder.
That's our son,
He said quietly.
Yeah, we created him.
Teddy kicked again. Sirius leaned in to kiss Remus. Day 247. After Remus had spent a weekend at Sirius's place and things had gone well, they had decided to immediately try an entire week of living together. Remus was quickly approaching the end of his pregnancy, and they would preferably already live together by the time Teddy was born, so they needed to make quick decisions. It wasn't the greatest way to go about it, but they had talked extensively about how they would share childcare duties if they weren't living together, and they had concluded that it would be needlessly difficult. Remus had started his paternal leave because of how difficult he found it to do his job when it required a lot of standing, his aches having not eased up at all. He had been going swimming as per the suggestion of his midwife, but Sirius was unsure if Remus felt that it had helped or not. Remus was tired a lot of the time. He had trouble sleeping at night, and he would nap sometimes even twice a day. Sometimes he napped while Sirius spooned him, and Sirius enjoyed those moments immensely. To have a sleeping Omega pregnant with his child in his arms was a feeling Sirius had never been able to imagine before. A profound joy, an immense show of trust that made Sirius's chest ache. A week of living together with Remus when neither had anywhere to go was probably ideal in telling them if they could stand each other's company day in and day out, even if it didn't tell them how things would work once Remus returned to work, and Sirius returned to, well, Sirius had been looking into volunteering and had sent a couple of applications already. He had also gone on a pottery course on a whim and really enjoyed it. He had also put his name down for a course on using the wheel, after which it would be easier to make cups and such. He didn't know what he was going to do with everything he made. Maybe he would give them as gifts. It would be funny to little by little replace Regulus's fancy crockery with Sirius's handmade things. Something that Sirius hadn't told Remus about was that he had been looking into learning Welsh. He had found a class he had signed up for, but while he waited for it to start, he had been looking for study resources online and had been slowly practicing different words. Remus had started getting pimples and was very grumpy about it. Sirius didn't think they were a big deal, but Remus groaned every time he found a new one. Some of them were apparently very sore too, which Sirius could empathize with. Remus had spent a lot of time reading, but he also spent a lot of time on his phone, and whenever Sirius asked him what he was doing, he evaded the question. It was odd. Sirius didn't know what to think about it. Was Remus watching porn? Was he? Sirius couldn't think of anything else that would have made someone not want to say what they were doing on their phone. Sirius had also found out that Remus chatted every day with his friends abroad. It always warmed Sirius's heart to see Remus tapping away on his phone, because it meant that he was connecting with someone. He often thought about how Remus had said that he didn't have proper friends in Wales, and it always made him endlessly sad. Sirius had thought that their week had gone well, but he wasn't sure what Remus thought. What if Remus thought things had been shit? What if Remus had decided that they were completely incompatible and it would be better for them not to even be in a relationship? What if Sirius would only get to see Remus and Teddy once a month or something? He had been feeling much better with Remus around to keep him company, but what if Remus didn't want Teddy to have a mentally unwell father? It was Saturday evening. They were seated on the sofa, Remus on his phone and Sirius on his. Although Sirius wasn't actually looking at his phone, he was covertly looking at Remus. Remus wore an expression of utter focus, and it was cute, and Sirius wanted to let him keep focusing on whatever it was that fascinated him so, but he was also getting twitchy with the unanswered questions. Sirius looked down at his phone. He had an English-Welsh dictionary open because he had wanted to check that the word he had been practicing was actually correct. He had been practicing the pronunciation while Remus had been in the loo, and he was relatively confident that he would be able to say it correctly, even though he couldn't quite figure out the R sound. He had been planning for days to use it to surprise Remus, but he always chickened out when the moment arose. He wouldn't chicken out this time.
Remus, Cariad.
Remus took a moment, but then he raised his head to look at Sirius, then frowned.
Wait,
He said,
what did you just say?
Cariad.
For a moment, Remus was perfectly still, then his lips parted slightly, and he looked at Sirius as if he had never seen him before. Sirius was getting nervous. Maybe he had got it completely wrong and accidentally called Remus a whore or something. Remus said, then shook his head.
You learned that word. For me.
Of course for you. Why else?
Remus's face was overcome by an expression Sirius didn't think he had ever seen before.
No one has ever bothered to learn a single word of Welsh for me.
Remus said,
And you learned to call me darling.
Yes.
That's one of the nicest things anyone has ever done for me.
Really. People should really be doing more nice things for you.
Remus laughed.
Did I pronounce it okay?
You pronounced it perfectly.
But I don't really know how to pronounce the R.
Perfectly.
But
perfectly. You have such a cute pronunciation.
Sirius could be pleased with that.
You're so amazing.
Remus said.
Come here.
Sirius went when Remus gestured for him, and Remus placed his hands on his cheeks to pull him into a kiss. It made Sirius smile.
Did you have something you wanted to talk about? Or did you just want to show off your language skills?
Remus asked.
I did actually have something I wanted to talk about.
What is it?
Sirius was suddenly shy. What if Remus rejected him completely? He hesitated. Remus was looking at him with gentle eyes.
How are you feeling today?
Sirius asked.
Ugh, don't even get me started. I'm so over this pregnancy.
That doesn't surprise me at all after what you've told me about how your body feels.
If I ever express the wish to have another baby, please remind me that I told you I will never, ever have another baby. Never.
Sirius chuckled.
I'll keep that in mind. Would you like me to record you saying that just in case?
Remus laughed.
Anything else?
Nothing interesting.
Not everything needs to be particularly interesting. I'm interested in whatever you have to say.
Remus looked at Sirius with such a gentle gaze that Sirius felt the urge to hide from it.
What about you?
Remus asked.
How are you feeling today?
Okay.
How's the anxiety?
It's been so much better now. I think the meds really work.
That's great.
Remus smiled.
You deserve to feel good.
Instead of saying anything, Sirius leaned in to kiss Remus. For a moment they merely kissed, and Sirius was very tempted not to ask what he had been meaning to ask, just to make sure that Remus wouldn't get the chance to reject him.
Remus,
He said quietly.
I did actually have something important I wanted to talk to you about.
Sounds serious.
It's not really, I guess it is, but nothing bad. I hope.
Remus raised his brows and Sirius laughed awkwardly.
What is it, Cariad?
Remus asked. Sirius couldn't help smiling at the pet name. Remus had never called him that before. It was almost enough to suppress his nerves. Almost.
It's just that our week is coming to an end,
He said.
I was just wondering how you feel about how things have gone.
I feel very good about it.
Sirius's relief was immense, and he couldn't stop letting out a deep exhale.
We haven't gone mad.
Remus said with a laugh.
That's true.
And I think the everyday life has been working fine, even if this isn't how it's always going to be, with me being home all the time.
Yeah, it's impossible to say how things would be different if you were working.
Remus nodded.
So, how do you feel about the idea of moving in together? Do you want to try another week at some point?
The thing is that the baby is going to come out sooner rather than later.
Remus bit his lip.
There really isn't much time for us to think, and I would much rather have moved by the time Teddy is born than have to go through the hassle of moving while trying to take care of a baby.
Yeah, that doesn't sound ideal, and I would really like to be there from the start to support you, but also to bond with him.
Yeah, so the issue is that I need to give my landlord a month's notice before my tenancy can end. But a month from now, Teddy might already be born. We also need to discuss what I'm going to be paying to live here.
To start with the first issue, you can give your landlord notice, and then you can move out before your tenancy actually ends for as long as you keep paying your rent until it ends. So you can do that and not pay anything to live here during that time.
Remus nodded in thought.
I guess that would make sense.
It makes a lot of sense.
Remus smiled.
What about the other issue?
To be honest, I don't know how much I'm paying to live here. My personal assistant has been taking care of it.
You have a personal assistant, even after you quit your job.
Yeah, well, I no longer really know how to live without.
Maybe you should learn.
Maybe.
Remus looked at him and thought. Sirius flushed. No one had ever made him feel embarrassed about having a personal assistant, and Sirius knew it hadn't been Remus's intent to make him embarrassed. But Remus was so independent and strong that Sirius wanted to be worthy of him.
In any case,
Sirius said,
I can afford to pay for everything.
Yeah, well, that doesn't help with me feeling like you're buying my time.
I know. So, I'll look into how much it is I pay, but I guarantee that whatever your share is, it won't be more than what you're currently paying for your flat. In fact, I think it will be less because I own this flat. There's no rent or mortgage to pay.
Remus nodded.
Let me know.
I will.
Sirius felt lighter after having talked to Remus, and for the first time in a while, he felt truly hopeful. Chapter 10. Day 262. Sirius opened the door to find a grinning James at his doorstep. He immediately grinned back, and James pulled him into a brisk hug.
It feels like forever,
James said as he patted Sirius's back.
It does. You should move the family here.
James laughed.
I can bring up the idea, but it will be pretty hard to get them to agree to uproot their lives.
Ah, that's too bad.
They smiled at each other, but then Sirius's phone chimed.
Tad will be here in 30.
We need to get going.
Sirius said.
I don't want Lyle to think I'm not helping Remus with the packing.
Let's go. Do you have everything?
They drove off in Sirius's car. Sirius had been helping Remus pack over the past couple of weeks, and they had moved some things already over to Sirius's flat, such as Teddy's stuff and crockery Remus didn't need, but there was still furniture to move. Unfortunately, Remus had refused to hire a company to do the moving because he didn't feel that he had enough stuff to justify hiring someone to move it, so they had needed to find other help. And even more unfortunately, the one person Remus knew who owned a van was his dad. Sirius was not looking forward to seeing Lyle again. He hadn't seen him since that time after Christmas, and while he knew that he would eventually need to see him again, he had been very happy about avoiding it.
Do you think he'll think I'm forcing Remus to move in with me?
Sirius blurted out.
Who? Remus's dad?
Yeah.
Well, considering that I don't know him at all, that would be a bit hard to say. Why would he think that you're forcing Remus?
Don't you remember what I told you after the dinner I had with them? And after I ran into him a couple of months ago? He's convinced that I'm some kind of predator trying to ruin Remus's life.
James didn't immediately say anything, which didn't help with Sirius's nerves.
Well,
James then said,
all you can really do is to prove him wrong. I think he'll see how much you care about Remus and Teddy, and then he'll start seeing you in a new light.
That doesn't stop me from being much older than Remus.
I don't think it's any of his business who Remus dates, to be honest. I think after he gets to know you, he'll see that the age difference isn't an issue for you.
Sirius sighed. James was probably right, but that didn't make it any easier to face Lyle after what he had said to Sirius the last time they had met. Remus opened the door with a smile on his face.
Hi,
Sirius said.
Hello.
Sirius leaned down to kiss him before pulling back and gesturing towards James.
This is James. James, meet Remus.
Hello.
James said.
I've heard a lot about you.
Yeah, same here.
To be honest, it hadn't quite sunk in yet that Sirius got someone pregnant until now that I'm seeing you.
Remus placed his hand over his tummy and laughed.
I, on the other hand, understood it during the first ultrasound.
Sirius said. Remus smiled. They went in, Remus waddling a bit as he walked. He sat down on the sofa with a grunt, and Sirius went over to stroke his shoulder.
How are you feeling today?
He asked.
Very sore. I'm looking forward to getting to lie down when this is all taken care of.
I'll lie down with you.
Remus looked up with a smile. Sirius opened his mouth to speak, but he was interrupted by the doorbell ringing.
Will you get the door for me?
Remus asked.
It's Tad.
I'll get it,
James said. Sirius turned to look towards the door when James opened it. Lyle's face fell when he looked at James.
Where's Remus?
He asked angrily.
Christ.
Remus muttered before raising his voice.
I'm right here, Tad. Jesus.
Hello.
James said cheerfully and offered his hand to Lyle.
I'm James Potter.
There was a moment's pause before Lyle took the offered hand.
Lyle Lupin.
I can't believe he's already being so hostile.
Remus muttered to Sirius. Sirius squeezed his shoulder. He had known to expect some hostility from Lyle after Remus had told him that Lyle had not reacted very favorably to Remus moving in with Sirius. Apparently he thought that they were moving too fast and Remus would end up homeless when they broke up, and Sirius wished that there was a way to prove that even if they ended up not working out, he would never abandon Remus without making sure that he had somewhere to live. Lyle came inside.
How are you, Remus?
He asked.
I would be better if you were kinder to my boyfriend and his best friend.
Remus said, turning to look at him.
How many times has Mam talked to you about accepting my decisions?
Lyle sighed but said nothing.
Where do we start?
James asked.
What about the bed?
Remus asked.
What time are they picking it up today?
Oh, they already picked it up yesterday.
Sirius said. Remus turned to look at him in confusion.
Where did you sleep?
On the sofa.
Why didn't you come here?
They texted me pretty late to ask if they could pick it up already, and then showed up even later, so I didn't want to disturb you in case you were sleeping.
I actually did fall asleep pretty early last night, so I probably was asleep.
Then I'm glad to have spent the night on the sofa.
Remus smiled at Sirius, and Sirius leaned down to kiss him. Lyle cleared his throat, and Remus rolled his eyes when Sirius pulled away. Sirius smirked, then turned to look at Lyle.
Do you have an opinion on which order we should pack the furniture into the car?
He asked. Lyle looked surprised to be addressed, but quickly schooled his expression.
Better start with the bed. Then we'll see what else we can fit in.
Sirius nodded, then turned to James.
Let's get started,
James said. He and Sirius went upstairs and Lyle followed. He took the mattress topper while Sirius and James carried the bed.
How come you decided to switch to Remus's bed?
James asked as they precariously made their way down the stairs.
It's newer than mine, and honestly more comfortable.
Yeah, yours was pretty old already, wasn't it?
Sirius nodded. When the bed was in the van, they looked at the space that was left in thought.
Nothing much else will fit.
James said.
But what about the stuff for the nursery?
Sirius glanced at Lyle, who was standing there with his arms crossed.
The cot hasn't been assembled yet.
Sirius said.
It will fit. We can probably fit in a box or two as well.
Lyle didn't offer his opinion. They went to fetch the cot and a couple of boxes of books. When the van was packed, Sirius went back in.
Do you want to come with us, or will you stay here?
He asked Remus.
I'll come with you. Then I can lie down for a moment.
Let me help you with your shoes.
Yes, please.
Sirius got Remus's shoes and helped him put them on. Remus rose from the sofa with a grunt.
I'll get a coil so that I won't ever get pregnant again.
Remus said.
I don't trust my ability to remember my pills.
I wish I could do more for you.
You're doing plenty.
Remus smiled and Sirius kissed him softly.
Will you follow us, or do you want my address?
Sirius asked Lyle when they got out.
Give me your address.
Sirius gave Lyle his address, got in the car, waited for Lyle to get the van started, and then drove off. Lyle followed him.
I'll have to come back again to get to know you properly, Remus.
James said as he looked around in interest.
Moving isn't the best time to get to know someone.
Remus laughed.
It really isn't. And I'm so grumpy right now. The pregnancy isn't treating me very well currently.
That's okay. I remember when Lily was close to the end. It was a bit of a nightmare.
Definitely.
I'll have to bring her and Harry to meet you too. We could make it before you give birth. Or would you prefer after?
I really don't know. What do you think, Sirius?
I think it depends on you.
Sirius said, making sure that Lyle kept up with him before turning the corner.
If you're not feeling well right now, maybe it would make sense to wait until the baby is born and you feel better. It would be much nicer for you to be able to properly focus on the visitors and not on how uncomfortable you are.
Maybe?
Just let me know when we can come.
James said.
We will.
Sirius said. They pulled over at Sirius's building, and Sirius got out to gesture at Lyle to drive to the door. Sirius helped Remus out of the car, and they headed to the door, Lyle already getting out of the van.
Let's take a couple of boxes with us.
James said as they got closer.
Not you, Sirius.
He added when Sirius tried to get closer.
Your job is to get Remus inside.
Remus huffed a laugh, and Sirius shrugged, offering his arm for Remus, who took it with a smile. They headed to the lift, James and Lyle following with boxes.
I think it would make sense to bring all the boxes at once.
James said.
Then the cot and the bed.
Makes sense.
Lyle said, sounding way less gruff than he always did with Sirius. Sirius and Remus got in the lift, just as James and Lyle headed back out.
How do you feel about Tad being a part of this?
Remus asked.
I'm inevitably going to have to deal with him, considering that he's your Tad.
Try not to be insulted by him or get upset. He's just overprotective.
I get that, don't worry.
I'll always worry.
Remus did smell worried, and Sirius leaned in to kiss him right when the lift came to a stop.
He hasn't smelled as hostile as he did the first time I met him.
Sirius said as they stepped out of the lift.
I consider that an improvement.
Yeah, I guess that's an improvement.
Sirius opened the door for Remus.
Did I tell you that I ran into him after Christmas?
You didn't.
Remus turned to look at Sirius with a frown.
What happened?
He said some things.
What things?
Sirius shrugged.
I got a bit upset, to be honest. But he wasn't wrong about my job taking up all the time I should be spending on you and Teddy.
Still, he shouldn't have talked to you like that.
It got me to decide to quit my job.
What?
Remus's frown deepened.
What on earth did he say?
Nothing that wasn't true. Do you need help with your shoes?
Yes, but don't try to deflect. What do you mean he got you to quit your job?
Sirius crouched down to open Remus's shoelaces.
He didn't get me to do it. He just gave me the push I needed. I had already been thinking about how my life wasn't the way I wanted it to be.
I'm going to have a word with him.
Please don't. I don't want him to be upset with me.
But Curiad,
Remus waited until Sirius looked up at him.
I don't want him to think that he can just talk to you that way. You deserve better.
Sirius's heart swelled with affection, and he smiled at Remus before finishing with his shoelaces.
Will you go upstairs and wait on the sofa while we bring the bed in?
Sirius asked. Remus looked at the stairs with a grimace.
I wish this flat was all in one story.
Yeah. Will you just bring me a chair down here? I really don't want to take stairs right this moment.
Of course.
Sirius kissed Remus and hurried upstairs to get a chair. On his way up, he heard the lift arrive at that floor, and things being brought out of it. He was on his way down when James pushed the door open and carried in a box.
Where should we take the boxes?
He asked.
Upstairs. Just stack them by the balcony door.
James nodded and headed upstairs, Lyle following soon after. He looked around with wide eyes, glanced at Sirius, who had just placed the chair down, and then followed James upstairs. Remus sat down with a grunt.
Okay.
Sirius asked.
Do you want something to drink?
Do you happen to have Sprite?
Yes, I've been keeping it around for you.
Then please get me some.
Coming right up.
Sirius leaned down to kiss the tip of Remus's nose, and Remus laughed. Sirius waited for James and Lyle to come down before heading back upstairs into the kitchen. He poured Remus a glass of Sprite, waited for James and Lyle to come back up, and went down to hand the glass to Remus, who took it with a thankful smile. Sirius stroked his shoulder before heading to the corridor to get a box. Once the boxes were in, they headed back down. Lyle got the cot and James and Sirius started moving the bed. It didn't fit into the lift, so they had to carry it up the stairs, and at every floor, Sirius swore in his mind and regretted deciding to switch beds. Once they got to Sirius's floor, Lyle kept the door open for them as they went in. They took the bed into the main bedroom and put it in its place.
This room is fucking huge.
James said, looking around.
What do you do with a bedroom this big?
The designer wanted me to have a nice little reading nook there.
Sirius pointed.
But I never got it done because I couldn't decide if I really wanted a reading nook in my bedroom.
Is Teddy going to sleep here with you?
Yeah, luckily I never decided about the reading nook, so there's room for his cot.
Lyle showed up with the mattress topper, and Sirius helped him spread it over the bed.
I'll get the bed made for Remus.
He said,
There's stuff to drink in the fridge if you want anything.
I wouldn't mind having something to drink, actually.
James said. He headed upstairs as Sirius went to the linen cupboard and got out a sheet.
The bed will be ready for you in a minute.
Sirius said to Remus.
Thank you, Curiad.
Sirius grinned. When the bed was made, Sirius helped Remus get up and get to bed. Remus let out a deep sigh as he lay down.
Did you bring the pregnancy pillow?
He asked. Sirius looked around, but the pillow wasn't there.
I don't know,
He said.
I don't remember seeing it. I'll ask James and Lyle.
Good.
Remus snuggled up to his pillow with his eyes closed, and Sirius brushed his fingers over his hair before heading upstairs. Lyle was holding a glass, looking out the round window overlooking the river in the dining room, while James was sitting at the table drinking a Coke.
Did someone bring Remus's pregnancy pillow?
Sirius asked.
Not me.
James said.
I thought you'd take it in the car with you.
Lyle said.
I didn't want it to get dirty.
Sirius said.
Makes sense. I didn't realize we left it behind.
Will Remus be okay without it?
James asked.
Oh, I'm sure he will. Better go and fetch it soon, though.
Sirius could feel Lyle's eyes on him, and after a moment's hesitation, he turned to look. Lyle looked around.
Where will you put the bookshelves?
He asked.
Right in that corner.
Sirius pointed.
And another one by the telly.
Lyle nodded. Silence fell between them. Sirius couldn't decide if he should drink something too.
I took a peek at the second bedroom.
James said.
It's big too.
Yeah, the bedrooms are large in this flat.
It will be nice for Teddy to have such a big room when he grows up a bit.
Yeah, it'll easily fit everything he needs.
The bathroom is a bit grey.
Sirius snorted and decided to have some water.
Yeah, I wouldn't have chosen those tiles myself. Remus doesn't like them either. Maybe we should renovate.
Renovating is probably not a very good idea when you're just about to have a baby.
Sirius laughed.
That's true. Besides, I've got used to them. It would be a shame to renovate a perfectly functional bathroom.
The balcony is tiny though.
Yeah, but at least the view is great.
It is.
James finished his drink.
You found a great flat on such short notice.
I was really lucky to find this.
Sirius could feel Lyle's eyes on him, but he didn't turn to look, focusing on his glass of water. He wasn't sure he particularly wanted to know what Lyle thought of Remus's new home.
Are you finished, Lyle?
James asked.
Yes.
Then let's get going so that Remus can get his pillow.
Sirius immediately emptied his glass and put it away, then headed downstairs without waiting for the others to follow. If only he didn't need to worry about how much Lyle was judging him. If only he could trust that Lyle would see things in a positive light. But he was almost certain that Lyle was looking for things to criticize, something to use against Sirius again, something that would justify his dislike of Sirius a bit more.
Do we all go in the van?
James asked outside. Sirius wanted to slap him a bit, just a bit.
That would make sense.
Lyle said. Sirius swore in his mind as he climbed into the van after James. At least James was there to act as a buffer, although Sirius didn't think Lyle particularly liked James either, probably because he was Sirius's friend. They drove back to Remus's in silence. James usually wanted to break the silence, but he remained quiet. He must have noticed the tension between Sirius and Lyle, illustrating that Sirius really had not exaggerated when he had told James that Lyle didn't like him.
Which things are still going to be moved to your place?
James asked as they stopped by Remus's door.
The bookshelves, the changing table, a lamp, a rug, then kitchen stuff. Did we already take all the books there?
I think so.
Let's pack the bookshelves into the van first, and then see what we can fit in with them.
James and Sirius carried the bookshelves while Lyle watched them. They added the changing table, and then they all carried boxes.
Was that everything?
Lyle asked when the van was full.
A pregnancy pillow.
Sirius said.
I'll get it.
James said.
I saw it upstairs.
Before Sirius could say anything, James had already stridden off. Sirius looked after him, and very carefully didn't look at Lyle even from the corner of his eye.
You live in a penthouse?
Lyle said.
Yes.
Sirius turned to look at him.
Is it rented?
No, I own it.
Lyle nodded. He was quiet for a moment, clearly thinking of something, but then said,
I think you're moving too fast.
We've known each other for years.
Yes, but you haven't been together for years.
Sirius couldn't argue with that. To be honest, he also thought it was too fast, but he also understood why Remus had wanted to be quick about the move. Lyle looked at him expectantly, and Sirius cleared his throat.
Remus wanted to move now,
he said.
He wanted to do it before Teddy is born, and I think it makes the most sense. It would be difficult to share childcare duties if we're living in different addresses.
Lyle grunted.
I want to be able to support Remus completely. I agree with him that it was best to do it now, even if it is fast.
And is that something you've been doing, supporting Remus?
Of course, as much as I've been able to, and as much as he has allowed me to.
Sirius always felt like he didn't do enough, that surely there were things he could have done to help Remus more, but he didn't want to hear someone else say it, so he hoped that Lyle wouldn't say that. Luckily, Lyle remained quiet, but Sirius still felt the itch to say something that would miraculously fix things.
I care a lot about Remus,
He said.
We've known each other for years, and Remus was always the highlight of my weeks. I'm glad that the pregnancy brought us closer, and has allowed me to spend more time with him and to get to know the real him better.
He tells me you quit your job.
Yes,
Why?
because Remus deserves better than a workaholic spouse.
Lyle looked at him searchingly, but before he could say anything, James showed up. He checked that the door was locked before coming to Sirius and Lyle, holding Remus's pregnancy pillow.
Ready to go.
He asked.
Yes.
Lyle said. Sirius wasn't sure whether to be upset with James for leaving him alone with Lyle. The conversation had gone, well. Sirius thought it had gone well, but it was impossible to say what Lyle thought. At least he hadn't smelled hostile, which felt like a victory. When they returned to Sirius's place, they carried the boxes in first. Sirius went to the bedroom with the pillow.
Hi, baby,
He said softly.
are you asleep?
No,
Remus opened his eyes with a sigh.
I need to pee.
We got the pregnancy pillow, so you'll have it when you return to bed.
Thank you. I think maybe I'll stay up for a while. Let's go upstairs.
All right.
Remus pushed himself up from the bed with a grunt and then waddled out of the room. Sirius followed him, and they waited for James to come down the stairs before heading up, Sirius helping Remus.
One day these stairs are going to kill me.
Remus said.
Let's hope not.
I shouldn't complain because my flat had stairs too, but I'm going to complain anyway.
Sirius barked out a laugh, and Lyle turned to look.
Feel free to complain whenever you want. Cariad.
Sirius said.
I'll listen.
You're wonderful.
Remus turned to smile at Sirius, and Sirius let him go into the bathroom on his own. Luckily, James came up the stairs with a box, so Sirius didn't need to be alone with Lyle again. They waited until Remus got out of the bathroom and was seated on the sofa before they went back down for the bookshelves. James and Sirius carried them, while Lyle oversaw the effort. Sirius suddenly worried that Lyle thought he and James found him too frail to carry the big pieces of furniture, when in reality, they just worked so well together that carrying stuff was easy to coordinate. Once everything was in its place, they ordered pizza, which unfortunately meant that Lyle was going to hang around for longer. While he was out moving the van to a proper parking spot, Remus leaned into Sirius.
How has Tad been?
He asked.
Okay, he doesn't smell hostile.
That's good. I think he's being very gracious about all this.
Yeah, he talked to me a bit while James was fetching the pillow.
Oh no.
Remus groaned.
What did he say?
Nothing bad really, just said that we're moving too fast.
Remus scoffed.
I've talked to him about that 100 times.
Maybe he wanted to hear my perspective on it.
What is your perspective?
That you were right to suggest that we should move in together before Teddy is born.
Remus nodded. He leaned in and kissed Sirius, and when they pulled back, Sirius spotted James smirking.
What?
He asked.
Nothing.
James said, extending each syllable.
You two are so cute together.
Remus let out an awkward laugh and blushed, and Sirius couldn't help reaching in to stroke his cheek. His heart fluttered at the thought that James accepted their relationship so readily. When Sirius had told James that he had decided to pursue an actual relationship with his sugar baby, who was also pregnant for him, James had been hesitant, and they'd had long conversations about what was the smart thing to do. James had never been against what Sirius wanted to do, but he had been a constant support, who wasn't afraid to ask Sirius difficult questions when needed. At that moment, Sirius was filled with the utmost gratitude for having a best friend as amazing as James, always ready to support him, even when he spontaneously moved to a different country to be closer to Remus. Lyle returned, and he and Sirius did awkward small talk while Remus looked at them with open amusement, and James kept trying to suppress his amused smile. Sirius wished that he didn't need to feel so wrong-footed with Lyle. Ideally, you'd get along well with your boyfriend's parents.
Hope will want to come and see the place soon.
Lyle said.
She can come tomorrow if she doesn't mind the boxes.
Remus said.
Right, Sirius.
Yeah, sure.
Every time Sirius and Remus's gazes met, they couldn't help smiling. Sirius really wanted to reach in and hold Remus's hand or kiss him, but he refrained because he didn't know what Lyle would say about that.
I don't think she'll be expecting a penthouse.
Lyle said.
Didn't I mention it when I told you I was moving?
Remus asked.
No.
Oh, well, sorry about that. I guess I'm already so used to the penthouse that I didn't think to mention it.
The stairs are dangerous.
We'll get a baby gate. We're going shopping tomorrow.
Lyle nodded. Luckily, the pizzas arrived, and Sirius got an excuse to go down to get it. giving him a break from Lyle's evaluating gaze. When he returned, James had engaged Lyle into a conversation about Lyle's job, so Sirius could have a moment of feeling like he wasn't under a microscope.
Ugh, pineapple on pizza.
Remus asked with a grimace.
Why didn't I know that you like pineapple on pizza?
I guess we've never had pizza together.
This is horrifying new information. I don't think I can be with someone who likes pineapple on pizza.
Oh, baby, I can change, I swear.
Remus raised his brow, but then his face broke into a smile, and Sirius broke into giggles.
You have extra cheese?
Sirius said.
I like cheese. The more the better.
I'll remember that.
Remus smiled sweetly, and Sirius couldn't help leaning in to kiss him. When he pulled back and turned to his pizza, his eyes happened to land on Lyle, who was watching them with a thoughtful expression. Sirius quickly looked away. Luckily, Lyle didn't stay for much longer after pizza. Remus got up to hug him before he left, and after both Lyle and Sirius hesitated, they ended up shaking hands, which Sirius found a bit odd, but at least that was the friendliest Lyle had ever treated him.
He's starting to like you.
Remus said when the door closed behind Lyle.
You think so? How can you tell?
The way he looks at you, and the way he smells.
I didn't notice anything special in his scent.
Yeah, but you don't know him like I do.
That was true, so Sirius couldn't argue. Remus sighed.
I want to take a nap.
He said.
Will you help me downstairs?
Of course.
Have a good sleep.
James said.
Thank you.
Remus smiled. Sirius helped Remus to bed, where Remus let out a long, pleased sigh as he lay down and snuggled up to his pregnancy pillow.
Have fun with James,
he muttered.
I will. Sleep well, baby.
Sirius leaned down to kiss Remus's cheek before heading out. James had moved to sit on the sofa when Sirius returned, and Sirius sat down next to him with a sigh.
It went well,
James said.
Do you think so? I thought Lyle was so cold with me.
I didn't see it like that. I thought he was a bit awkward, not cold. I don't think he hates you.
Hopefully not. At least he didn't tell me I'm not worthy of Remus this time.
James snorted.
You're laughing at my pain.
James laughed.
I sure am.
It felt nice to spend time with James again. They hadn't physically seen each other since Christmas, when they were used to seeing each other at least once a week. 2 months felt more like a year.
I wish we lived closer to each other,
Sirius said.
Yeah, me too. It's been hard not to be able to see each other when we want.
Sirius nodded. Sometimes he lay in bed awake, thinking about James. It felt unfair that to gain a family, he had to give up his best friend, who he also considered family. It was unfair that he had to choose.
Maybe it will be easier to visit now that you're all settled.
James said.
And now that you're not working all the time.
Yeah, and once Teddy is born.
Are you really going to call him Teddy?
It won't be his real name, no.
Are you keeping the real name a secret?
Yes, we are.
Sirius smiled.
You'll be the first to know once he's born.
I'll hold you to that. Will he have a Welsh name?
Yeah, it makes the most sense with him living in Wales and being half Welsh.
Yeah. How do you think raising him bilingual is going to work for you? Remus has to speak English with you, doesn't he? So will the baby pick up more English than Welsh?
Actually, I've started going to a Welsh class.
You have?
James sounded genuinely surprised.
Why haven't you said anything about it before?
I don't know. Somehow it just feels embarrassing. What if I don't learn anything?
I think you will, and I think Remus will be very excited that you're learning his language.
Maybe. It will just take forever for me to learn enough to be able to talk to him.
But you have such a great opportunity to practice at home with him. You can get so much conversation experience just by talking to your boyfriend.
Yeah, that's true.
Sirius was almost certain that Remus would be excited to know that he was learning Welsh, but something had kept him from talking to him about it. Was it really just the fear of failure? Remus wouldn't hold it against him, even if he did fail. Sirius would need to tell Remus at some point, but he wanted to spend a while longer gathering courage and maybe learning a few more words. Chapter 11. Day 274. Sirius had returned from his Welsh class the previous day to Remus asking him where he had been, and him lying poorly that he had been on a walk. Remus had looked at him with raised brows, but hadn't said anything. The rest of the evening, however, he had been thoughtful and a bit tense. Remus was unusually quiet the next day, too. Sirius didn't like it. He didn't like lying to Remus, but the thought of telling him the truth made him feel raw on the inside. Remus spent most of the day on his phone, typing frantically, and then at times, staring into the distance. The boxes from their move were gone. Sirius had organized Remus's bookshelves according to Remus's instructions, and after some maneuvering, they had fit all of Remus's kitchenware in the kitchen. Sirius had also finally assembled the cot, which stood in the bedroom where the interior designer had wanted Sirius to have a reading nook. The flat felt ready for Teddy. They had celebrated Remus's birthday with a nice dinner with his parents, which had gone better than Sirius had expected, with Lyle acting less coldly towards him, and Hope being her lovely self. Remus was sitting on the sofa, eyes on his phone as he read something. Sirius was sitting on the armchair, covertly looking at Remus while pretending to check his Instagram. Sirius didn't like the odd tension between them. He was sure it was because Remus knew he had lied to him the previous day, but telling the truth felt so vulnerable that Sirius didn't know how he ever could.
Sirius,
Remus said suddenly, raising his head.
Yeah.
would you scent me?
Sirius's heart skipped a beat. Remus wanted him to scent him. Sirius had secretly been wanting to ask if Remus wanted it, but he hadn't dared to suggest it because he had worried that Remus would think it was too soon. But now Remus was looking at him, eyes flashing with something resembling a challenge, and it felt odd, but Sirius didn't understand why.
Of course,
He said,
if you want me to.
But do you want to?
Yes, of course, Remus. I like you so much. I would be honored to scent you.
Remus looked at him searchingly, but then nodded.
Do it then.
You don't sound very happy about it.
I am, seriously.
Remus smiled, but there was a weird edge to it.
Are you sure you want to smell like me?
Why wouldn't I?
Remus said nothing. Sirius waited for a moment, but when Remus remained quiet, he put his phone away and got on the sofa.
Are you sure you want me to?
Sirius asked.
Are you sure you want to smell like me?
I'm sure.
Sirius smiled. Remus smiled back. Sirius leaned in, took one last look at Remus's face, and when he couldn't find anything alarming in his expression, he brought their necks closer, pressing their scent glands together. Remus released a breath as their glands activated and their scent strengthened until they were swirling in the air, combining as Sirius rubbed their glands together. He felt a surge of something that he couldn't quite comprehend, something that was peaceful but also possessive, something that felt right, and he pressed closer, wrapping his arm around Remus as he let out a sigh. Remus's hand found purchase at the back of Sirius's top, and they remained like that for a long time, glands pressed together as they formed a scent bond. It felt good, and by the time Sirius finally pulled back, he was achingly hard. Remus opened his eyes to meet Sirius's gaze, and for a moment they looked at each other. There was something questioning in Remus's eyes, and Sirius leaned in to kiss him softly.
Would you like a blowjob?
Sirius asked.
Fuck, yes, please.
Remus didn't need to ask twice. Sirius fetched a towel to put under Remus, and then knelt before him. He pulled Remus's bottoms down to expose his cock that was so hard it was leaking. He looked at it for a moment before leaning in to take it in his mouth, his hand going into his own pants to grip his cock. He did everything he knew Remus liked, determined to give Remus the most pleasure he possibly could, and when Remus came in his mouth, he happily sucked him dry.
Do you want me to blow you?
Remus asked.
Although, actually, I don't think I'm capable of that right now.
Sirius laughed.
It's okay, baby. You can give me a hand instead.
Remus nodded. Sirius got on the sofa and pushed his bottoms down to expose his cock for Remus, who immediately took it in his hand and stroked hard. Sirius moaned, already very close to the edge, and having Remus touch him for the first time in what felt like forever was quick to push him over it. He came with a gasp, spilling over Remus's hand, and it felt so good he could have cried. They hadn't had sex much during Remus's third trimester because the longer into it they were, the less Remus felt like having sex. And it was fine. Sirius understood that Remus was uncomfortable and didn't feel sexy at all, and Sirius would have never wanted Remus to force himself to do it when he didn't feel like it. That didn't mean that he didn't miss the closeness sex gave them, no matter how pleased he was with just cuddling Remus and kissing him.
So good, Cariad.
Sirius said with a sigh when his knot went down.
I love it when you call me that.
Yeah.
Remus nodded.
It makes me feel like you genuinely want to connect with me.
Oh, baby, of course I want to connect with you.
Remus smiled, then raised his hand.
Would you like to connect with me by cleaning my hand?
Sirius laughed.
Right away.
He kissed Remus, then headed to the bathroom. He cleaned what little cum he had got on his stomach, and then returned to Remus with a flannel, which he used to wipe his hand clean, and then his arse, which had got a bit slick. While he was taking the flannel to the bathroom, he made a decision. So when he returned to the sitting room, he sat down next to Remus and pulled him against him.
This is nice.
Remus said with a sigh.
Yeah.
What is it?
It felt amazing that Remus already knew Sirius well enough to be able to tell when something was wrong. Sirius took a deep breath.
I wanted to tell you something.
He said,
Okay.
It makes me a bit embarrassed.
Why?
I don't know. It just does.
Sirius took a deep breath. He really didn't understand why he had such a hard time telling Remus.
When you asked me yesterday where I had been, I didn't tell you the truth.
Remus's scent went bitter and Sirius squeezed his shoulder.
I've started going to a Welsh class.
Sirius said very quietly.
What?
Remus pulled away from Sirius to look at him, although Sirius didn't look back.
You've started going to a Welsh class, and this is something that embarrasses you.
Sirius nodded.
Why on earth would it embarrass you?
I don't know. It feels so. It's your first language.
I'm bilingual.
Well, it's your other first language. It just feels, what if I'm really bad at it? What if I can't learn?
I'm sure you'll be able to pick up at least some of it. Although, knowing how smart you are, I don't doubt that you will learn to speak fluently.
Sirius let out a noise of acknowledgement.
You already speak many languages, right?
Sirius nodded.
And if you were able to learn those languages, why wouldn't you be able to learn Welsh?
That made sense, and it wasn't an angle Sirius had considered before. That didn't stop him from fearing the worst.
But this language is personal to me,
He said.
It's the language of someone I care about deeply and will be the first language of my child. I just want to.
Sirius wasn't entirely sure what he was trying to say, so he let his words trail off. Remus said nothing, waiting for Sirius to say something, but Sirius remained quiet.
Well,
Remus finally said.
the good thing is that you have a home tutor.
Sirius finally turned to look at Remus, who was smiling softly.
I'll help you if you ever feel like you need the extra help.
Thank you.
Sirius smiled, and Remus leaned in to kiss him, softly, and Sirius let himself focus on Remus for a moment, just feeling him close, smelling his new scent that had Sirius's scent intrinsically linked to it. Remus leaned back against Sirius, and Sirius wrapped his arm around him. They were quiet, and Sirius felt lighter for having told Remus the truth.
Sirius,
Remus then said quietly,
Yeah.
since you were honest with a hobby that you were shy about, I feel like I should be too.
Oh, I didn't realize you had a hobby I don't know about.
Remus nodded. Sirius wished that he could see his face, but he didn't want to pull away.
You never go anywhere without telling me where you're going.
Sirius said.
It's something you can do at home.
Okay.
Remus swallowed and took a deep breath, but remained quiet. Sirius let him gather his courage in peace.
Right?
Remus eventually said.
Oh, that's wonderful. What do you write?
Do you know what fan fiction is?
No, I've never heard of that.
Yeah.
Remus took a moment before he continued.
It's when let's say you're a fan of a TV show, then you take characters that were on the show and write a story about them.
I see. So you're writing your own stories but using someone else's characters.
Yeah.
That sounds fun. Why are you shy about telling people that you write?
Because I don't want them to ask me what I'm writing. I'm so bad at coming up with vague answers.
Why would you need to be vague about it?
Remus swallowed and started fiddling with his fingers. Sirius squeezed him a bit in support, leaning his head against Remus's, even though it put a strain on his neck.
Because
Remus said,
a lot of what I write is porn.
Oh, indeed. Sirius would have never in his wildest dreams imagined that Remus was writing porn. He had never thought about what Remus thought of porn. It wasn't something that had come up between them, despite how their relationship had started. But the photos Remus had been sending Sirius over the years were porn, weren't they? So maybe it shouldn't have surprised Sirius that Remus also wrote porn. Remus turned his head and stuck his nose against Sirius's scent gland. Was it because he was searching for support, or because he wanted to know how Sirius felt about the revelation?
Do you find it fun?
Sirius asked.
Yes.
Do you get money for it?
No, you can't monetize fan fiction.
I see. You must find it very fun then.
Hobbies are supposed to be fun, aren't they?
True.
Sirius straightened his head before his neck started properly hurting, which had the unfortunate side effect of Remus pulling away from him.
What do you do with the stories?
I post them online.
And do people read them?
Yeah.
Remus bit his lip.
I have over 300 subscribers.
300. That's a lot of subscribers.
Yeah.
Remus leaned back against Sirius.
I can't believe I have so many. Like, how come there are so many people who want to read what I write?
I think it says that you're a great writer.
Remus shrugged.
Could I read something you wrote?
Remus didn't immediately say anything, and his scent went hesitant.
It's okay if you don't want to let me.
I'll have to think about it.
Okay. I think it would be fun to see what you're into.
I don't always write things that I'm into. Sometimes I write something just because it's interesting, not because it turns me on.
But that means that you're intellectually into it, the idea of it.
Remus laughed.
Maybe.
What do...
Remus gasped and straightened up, pressing his hand against his tummy.
What's wrong?
Sirius asked.
A contraction.
A Braxton Hicks.
No, I think this is a real one.
Sirius was immediately alert. He knew that getting one contraction didn't mean that the baby was immediately going to come out. He knew that Remus might be having contractions on and off for days before the baby actually came out, but he still felt a sense of urgency. He waited for the contraction to pass and Remus to relax again, and then pulled Remus back against him.
Was that the first real contraction you've had?
He asked.
Yeah, at least the first one that intense. Ugh. And you're telling me they're only going to get worse. Christ.
Maybe getting the coil is your best course of action after this.
Remus laughed. Sirius was itching to ask Remus more about his writing, but he refrained, since Remus had been so shy to talk about it. He could only hope that Remus found the courage to show Sirius something. Remus's hobby explained why he spent so much time on his phone, but why didn't he write on a computer? Did Remus even have a computer? Sirius couldn't remember seeing him with one ever.
Do you actually own a laptop?
He asked.
Not currently.
Why?
My previous one broke, but I didn't really use it for much, so I didn't feel like it was justified to spend money on getting another one.
You should have asked me to get you one. When did the previous one break?
Last spring.
Sirius frowned.
You've been without a laptop for a year. Why didn't you tell me you needed a new one?
You were already paying me so much money.
Remus, in case you haven't noticed, money is not an issue for me. I would buy you anything you wanted me to buy you, now and back then.
What if what I really wanted you to buy me was a Lego set?
Tell me which one, and I'll get it for you.
Remus's scent was pleased as he pulled away from Sirius to look at him with a smile. Sirius leaned in to kiss him.
Would you feel like I'm buying sex from you if I bought you the Lego set of your dreams?
He asked. Remus laughed.
Probably not.
And what if I also bought you a laptop?
You haven't even been getting sex lately.
All the more reason for you not to feel like I'm paying you for it.
Sirius hoped that he hadn't stepped too far, but Remus only grinned.
You should have told me you needed a new laptop, and I would have got it for your birthday.
Sirius said.
You're wonderful.
Sirius's heart skipped a beat, and he leaned in to kiss Remus again.
I really mean it, though.
He said as he pulled back.
Tell me which Lego set you want, and I'll get it for you.
Remus said nothing, but pulled Sirius into another kiss. The rest of the day passed by peacefully, only broken up by Remus's contractions that all sent Sirius into overdrive, no matter how much he tried to calm himself down. Remus didn't seem worried, so Sirius hoped that he managed to maintain a relaxed exterior. As they headed to bed, they brushed their teeth side by side, and Sirius looked at Remus in the mirror. Remus looked tired, but that didn't take away from his cuteness. Sirius loved his face, the slope of his nose and the color of his eyes, the dusting of freckles on his cheeks. Remus caught his eye and smiled, a trickle of toothpaste escaping the corner of his mouth. They spooned together in bed, Sirius resting his hand over Remus's tummy, feeling Teddy kick.
Hopefully he won't kick me much during the night.
Remus mumbled.
He's been so active every night this past week, and he kicks hard.
I'm sorry.
Sirius stroked Remus's tummy.
Let's hope he'll let you sleep.
Sirius kissed the back of Remus's neck, and it didn't take him long to fall asleep. He had a dream that he was escaping from someone who was trying to harm him, disguising himself and moving to live in a school that was located next to a monastery, and he made friends with one of the monks, who was helping him grow vegetables in his rooftop garden. And one day, Sirius noticed a note saying that there was going to be a meeting that he needed to go to, even though he didn't want to. But then,
Sirius.
Remus hissed. Sirius had a hard time surfacing from the dream, and he grunted.
Sirius.
Remus shook his shoulder.
You need to wake up.
What?
My waters broke.
Sirius was suddenly wide awake, raising himself onto his elbow as he looked at Remus, who had changed out of his pajamas.
The contractions are coming close together.
Remus said.
I already called the hospital. You need to drive me there.
Yes, of course, yes.
Sirius scrambled up from the bed and got dressed in such a rush that he tried to pull on Remus's sweatshirt and spent an embarrassingly long time wondering why he couldn't fit into it. But he eventually was dressed and ready to go. Sirius's heart was hammering in his chest as he helped Remus into his shoes, as they stopped for a moment while Remus wrote out another contraction, and while he checked that he had his keys before they went out. As they started the trip to the hospital, Sirius reached in to take Remus's hand into his and gave it a squeeze.
I'm nervous.
Remus said.
I'm nervous too, but we'll be there together, and I'll support you the whole way through. It'll be okay.
Sirius glanced at Remus, who nodded, his scent growing a bit more confident.
Can you believe Teddy will be born only a few days after your birthday?
Sirius asked.
At least it's not on the same day. I would have hated spending my birthday in labor.
Did you ever think about how your parents must have had sex around the same time we did when they conceived you?
Oh my God, shut up. I do not need to be thinking about my parents' sex habits.
Sirius laughed. As they got to the hospital, Sirius helped Remus out of the car and took his bag. He pressed his hand onto Remus's lower back as they walked into the hospital together, headed towards one of life's biggest adventures together. Sirius's heart felt full to bursting when he first saw Teddy, and when Remus first got to hold Teddy, his tiny body pressing against Remus's chest as Remus pressed his cheek against his head. Sirius blinked hard to hold back his tears, but then Remus looked at him with the brightest eyes Sirius had ever seen. And was it really important to hold back? Sirius leaned down to kiss Remus and to stroke Teddy's wispy hair. Chapter 12. 1 year later. Sirius returned home feeling drained. He volunteered as a befriender for the elderly, and he'd had a chat with a lovely woman called Maureen, who had spent a lot of the time talking about her dead wife and the grief she was going through. Sirius was happy that he was able to offer her support when she needed it, but it was overwhelming to listen to someone whose grief was still so fresh, and he couldn't help thinking that he hadn't done a very good job comforting her. And in the end, was there a way to comfort someone who had lost their lifelong mate? Probably not.
I'm home.
Sirius called from the door.
Hi.
Remus's voice came from upstairs. Sirius quickly got out of his shoes and jacket and jogged up the stairs to find Remus and Yanto in the sitting room. Yanto turned his sunny face to Sirius and reached toward him.
Dada,
He said. Both Sirius and Remus froze, staring at Yanto, who was reaching for Sirius with both hands now. Remus was the first to recover and scooped Yanto into his arms.
Yes, that's your dada.
He said.
Good job, Yanto.
I was his first word.
Sirius asked in awe. Remus turned to look at him with a grin.
Yes.
Sirius knelt in front of them and took Yanto from Remus's arms.
Hello, Yanto.
He said.
You're right, I'm your dada, and here's your tata.
Sirius pointed at Remus, and Yanto turned to look with an incoherent babble, which made Remus's smile widen.
Did you have a good day?
Sirius asked.
We did. We went for a little walk after the parent-child group with Caradoc and Tomos.
That's nice. How are they?
They're fine. We're invited to Thomas's birthday next month.
Oh, sweet. It will be nice to meet them properly.
Sirius had only met Caradoc and his son in passing, could barely imagine their faces when he really tried. It would be good to get to know them more, especially because they were quickly becoming a staple in Remus's life.
Caradoc also suggested that Yanto and Tomos could have a play date.
Remus said.
He said he'd like to get to know us better. His mate, too.
That's wonderful.
Sirius leaned in to kiss Remus.
Am I invited?
You definitely are.
Yanto babbled, and Sirius turned to look at him.
How did you like your walk with Tad and his new friend?
I'd hardly call Caradoc a friend.
He asked to spend more time with you. Sounds pretty friendly to me.
Remus bit his lip.
Do you think so? Don't you think that he's just being kind?
Cariad, I think he's making an effort to become your friend. Just accept it.
But people don't just want to be friends with me.
I don't think that's true. I think you're just shy and easily push people away.
Remus frowned in thought, and Sirius smacked a loud kiss onto Yanto's cheek, which made him giggle.
Did you already talk about when the play date would be?
Sirius asked.
On Friday.
Good. I have nothing that would stop me from coming with you.
Yeah,
Remus smiled.
I remembered.
Sirius smiled too, then leaned in towards Remus's neck. Remus tilted his head out of the way, and Sirius gently pressed his teeth against the mating mark there before kissing it. Remus exhaled heavily, and when Sirius pulled back, he grabbed Sirius's face between his hands and pulled Sirius into a kiss.
We're getting hungry,
he said against Sirius's lips. Sirius laughed.
I'll get started on food then.
Yanto's hand tapped against Sirius's chest, and Sirius raised him into a proper cuddle before he released him.
Dad needs to make food for you now,
he said. Yanto reached for Sirius with a whine as he stood up, and Sirius hesitated.
I'll read to him while you cook.
Remus said.
That will distract him.
Remus fetched a book, and as he returned, he showed it to Yanto, whose attention immediately shifted to the book. Remus opened it and started reading, the Welsh words sounding more and more familiar each day. Sirius had been going to the Welsh class for a year, but he still felt shy about it and hadn't had the courage to say anything to Remus in Welsh. He had been trying to do it, had rehearsed several sentences that he would love to say to Remus, but something always stopped him from actually saying them. That evening, when Sirius had put Yanto to bed, he returned to the sitting room to find Remus sitting on the sofa with his laptop in his lap, typing away.
Are you working on something old or something new?
Sirius asked.
Something new. I already finished the previous one.
Sirius sat down next to him.
That's nice.
Actually,
Remus paused and bit his lip hesitantly before turning to look at Sirius.
would you be able to beta read it for me? My usual beta doesn't have time for it.
Of course.
Remus smiled.
Do you have a schedule for it?
No, so just do it when you have a moment.
I have a moment now.
Remus huffed a laugh.
I'll send it over. I use Ellipsis. Do you know it?
I have no idea what that is.
It's an online writing tool. I'll show you how it works.
Sirius looked at Remus as he opened a new tab on his browser. Remus had become much braver about sharing things about his writing, and he had let Sirius read a couple of his fics over the months, but he had never asked Sirius to help him with one before. It was such an immense expression of trust that Sirius was nearly overwhelmed by it, and he determined to do the best job he could possibly do. Sirius relaxed into watching Remus explain the software to him, and at that moment, he felt calm. If someone had asked him 2 years ago if he would ever start a family, he would have laughed in their face and done his job twice as hard. Who could have known that he would happily become a family man? Finite. Thanks for listening to this text-to-speech podfic composed by Burning Aurora, Caliana, and Flowerhawk.